Good evening, councillors, and also all those guests on our YouTube and Zoom channels. Welcome to the online meeting of the full council of Colchester Borough Council on the 3rd of December 2020. I am Councillor Robert Davidson, Mayor of the Borough of Colchester, and I will be chairing this meeting tonight. The meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom on the internet and on the council's YouTube channel, which will be available to watch afterwards. I want to confirm that while the four of us here are in the town hall for this meeting, all of us present in this room are adhering to the latest government guidance. The meeting is permitted under the all-tier regulations, and I can assure those watching that the meeting room is set up to meet social distancing requirements. We also have all the windows open, which you can understand in December is quite effective. Whilst we are not wearing masks while seated, they will be worn if and when we leave our seats. We have undertaken a COVID risk assessment for this meeting. To begin, there's some housekeeping matters. Would all participants please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak? Could participants indicate to speak using the raise hands facility? The votes tonight will be administered by a roll call of councillors or by informal indications depending on the subject matter. And we will look to have a break at approximately 90-minute intervals. I would like to invite my chaplain, the Reverend Dr. Amanda Elms, to open the meeting with a prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and a very good evening to everyone. And I'm delighted to meet you all. I think some of us have met previously and many of us haven't. So it's my pleasure to be with you this evening. So let us pray. God of grace and truth, we thank you for giving us gifts and skills which we may use in the service of this great borough. Please guide us through your Holy Spirit so that we may discover your will for our borough and bring it into fruition. Help us to discuss the issues before us with courtesy, truth, and mutual respect, and grant that all who are representative of this community and its people will seek to serve the common good through him who came not to be served, but to serve, Jesus Christ our Lord. Especially during this time of pandemic, we pray for wisdom when we consider the financial implications for the council and all who live in the borough. We pray for all of those who have been affected adversely, both financially and physically, for those whose livelihoods have come to an end and those who are vulnerable physically, mentally and emotionally. Please give wisdom to all those endeavouring to support them. We pray for the safeguarding and well-being of those in the care of the council, for its policies and practices that uphold the common life of all people. And we give thanks for our Mayor, Councillor Robert Davidson and his wife Liz, as they are towards the beginning of their mayoral term of office. Please bless them in all that they do in and for this borough. Amen. Let us join our prayers together in the words Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And there's some very sound words in that sermon. We have apologies tonight from three councillors, Councillor Arnold, Chapman and P. Oxford. We now move on to item 2, have our say, and 4 speakers, all of whom wish to speak at this point of the meeting regarding the motion we will be discussing later on reducing inequalities. Can I first call Alison Andreas from the Colchester Institute?
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I'm Alison Andreas. I'm a member of One Colchester Strategic Board and a Colchester Ambassador. I've been a Colchester resident for 30 years. I've worked at Colchester Institute for 23 years, and I've been the Principal and Chief Executive of Colchester Institute for the last 7. And it's in particular in that capacity that I'd like to have my say. Here at Colchester Institute, we work with around 5,000 students and apprentices under the age of 18, and a further 3,000 adults every year. Every day, we see the impact of the inequalities that this motion speaks about: economic, social, academic, and in health and well-being. We already work hard to address these inequalities, in particular where they act as a barrier to student retention and success. We provide additional learning support, welfare and counselling services, and financial support through our bursary scheme and our college charity, the Colchester Institute Foundation Trust, without which some students would just not afford to stay on their programmes. But we don't always win. Every year, some 200 students leave their programmes without completing, and in at least half of these cases, social and economic inequalities play a significant part. Now, it's well documented that one of the key determinants of health and well-being is education. On one level, it's as simple as the fact that the better someone's literacy, the safer and healthier they and their families can be, simply through accessing and understanding instructions, food labelling, health advice, and so on. But the link between education, economic well-being, and health is also critical. Education, and in particular, the kind of education and training that we offer, which provides vocational skills and qualifications that enable young people and adults to enter the world of work or progress in their careers, is vital. Being in work and economically secure is a key determinant of people's physical and mental well-being and that of their families. So this motion is central to Colchester Institute's purpose, and I personally and my college would love to work in partnership with Colchester Borough Council and other key stakeholders to take forward these ambitions. None of us can do this alone, but working together to a set of common goals can achieve great things, and we'd be really proud to be part of that.
Thank you very much, Alison. That's appreciated. The next speaker we've got is Ed Garrett. If you'd like to speak for up to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. So my name's Ed Garrett. I'm the Chief Executive of the North East Essex Clinical Commissioning Group and the Chief Executive for the Suffolk and North East Essex Integrated Care System, which means I'm the lead officer for the NHS locally. I absolutely fulsomely support the motion that's being put forward around tackling inequality. I'm absolutely passionate about it and committed to working with all colleagues in Colchester to address this incredible challenge that we have before us. The COVID pandemic has exposed the inequalities that we have in our society, but in truth, the inequalities that we have been part of a slow pandemic that have been with us for generations. As the previous speaker just said, there's a direct relationship between economic health and physical health. And I'm very, very keen to partnership work with all partners in Colchester to make those links. So thank you very much for inviting me this evening. I will dedicate personally my leadership to support this motion and work very closely with all partners in Colchester that are committed to driving it forward. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak.
Thank you very much, Ed. Our next speaker is Tracy Rugling from Community 360.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, Tracy Rugling. I'm the Chief Executive of Community 360, and I've been with the organisation for some 27 years. I'm also the Vice Chair of One Colchester, Chair of the North East Essex Children's Partnership Board, and a Colchester Ambassador. So again, like previous colleagues, we welcome this motion around reducing inequalities. But I will begin by saying that getting things done isn't always about the money. COVID has shown us that people are at their best when we develop their assets. And in the main, if the message is clear, they will respond. However, communication, connectivity and cooperation, if done in a joined up way, is critical. That sharing intelligence on the ground and across the system worked well in Colchester through our One Colchester partnership. For the first time, we shared precious and trusted information about the most vulnerable people. And then we marched on the ground and we got things done as a joined up team with no bureaucratic, sovereign emphasis. We behaved as one engine room. This motion demonstrates that this is not the time to take our foot off the gas, moreover, to accelerate the people's spirit and further invest in the assets available to us at street level and keep the right people involved. There's been a national strategic disinvestment in local place for many years, particularly on the early intervention and prevention agenda. This in turn, over many years, has meant that a place-based investment has taken quite a scattergun approach, in that we tend to react to what is the topic or flavour of the day and use the term scale up and replicate. That just doesn't always work. C360's recent mapping and insight work has shown that each street and village is different, and we're going to crack some of these sad realisations building ground up, not top down. And it's all of our business and our reality check on building strong citizens' participation. We need to further invest and develop the asset-based community development approach at grassroots level, encouraging local volunteer champions to feel included, valued, and correctly deployed where they're needed the most. We welcome the motion of a twice-yearly report, and I would further suggest that this should be linked into the current C360 and partners three-year insight asset mapping programme that aligns to the Alliance neighbourhood level engagement and captures the real life stories. Digital inclusion requires further consideration, as our recent survey tells us that to date 41% of current online people, but means that we need to be mindful of how we reach those that simply are not online and that are struggling with the reduction of face-to-face interaction. Mental health and social isolation across all demographics are the two biggest concerns for citizens and remain a long-term challenge for the borough. Many peer-to-peer and in-person support services have ceased due to COVID-19. This includes recreational activities and home visits that would have previously been provided by key service and statutory providers. Special education need and cultural groups have provided us with some rich data and remain a high priority. Of the three neighbourhoods, Colchester Central has had the highest take-up of citizens' advice services. So to summarise, I would advocate that we utilise the current local mapping and insight work, which drills down into postcode level to act as a repository for place and vulnerability, which would then feed into the local alliance work through our brilliant One Colchester partnership. I would advocate that One Colchester, with a proven track record, be suitably resourced to drive system leadership even further and develop a robust community strategy. At senior and strategic level, our teams are well connected and joined up. I believe we could think more creatively on how we deploy our operational community teams further to reduce duplication, but concentrate on inequalities and integration on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Our final speaker tonight on the reducing inequality motion is Una Corrigan from the Anglia Ruskin University. Are you there, Una?
Yes, I am, and I'm very sorry, but I got my wires crossed. I was aware that I was invited to attend, but I didn't realise I was supposed to speak. But I can speak off the top of my head because I've been working on this project today, as in we did a valuable piece of work with Pam Donnelly and other senior members at Colchester and Tendring Borough Council. And the focus of that was to address inequalities in the North East Essex area with regards to focusing on community assets. And by community assets, we mean groups of people who are gathered together for an activity or a common purpose, who meet regularly, some of whom are charities, supported by charities, and some of the assets that we looked at, one in particular comes to mind, was self-funded. So that was a indoor bowls club in Clacton that had nearly 500 members. So these various groups that we studied all congregated, gathered people to their meetings. Some, as I say, such as the Bowls Club, were open every day. Most were met at least once a week, but they all provided valuable support to enhance the members' health and well-being in various ways, as our in-depth study of the lived experience demonstrated. And it clearly showed that these groups were often lifelines for vulnerable participants, vulnerable members who were either vulnerable because of age, location, or ill health, or in one of the groups that we looked at were actually veterans. So they were all linked into the previous asset mapping work that's just been mentioned in Colchester and tendering. And we made a set of recommendations, and that I'm very pleased to report has been taken forward by the local authorities involved, and also the North East Essex Health and Wellbeing Alliance, who funded the study. So where we are now is that I'm taking this forward with the research team, with the support, so it's co-designed, co-produced research with our expert panel at Colchester and Tendering and Essex County Council members. And we are now going to explore what life under lockdown has been for these people who haven't been able to meet in the way that they would have done. So, for example, the Dementia Cafe the last group we attended was just before the lockdown. And we're wondering how the participants are faring. Also, we want to speak to the organisers of these groups to understand what they might need in order to get the groups up and running again, and supporting the health and wellbeing needs of these populations. In addition, we're also going to add 2 additional groups representing Black and ethnic minority communities, because we understand, of course, COVID has shown us how these groups are vulnerable and how we need to give special attention to those groups, as well as the other vulnerable minority and vulnerable groups in North East Essex. So I look forward to coming back and telling you more. And I'm sorry that I was unprepared. We've obviously got wires crossed somewhere, but I hope you appreciate that I've just delivered this on the hoof, and I hope it's made some sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're very grateful, and some real examples there of community interaction. And I think I speak for all our councillors when we say we've been encouraged and delighted how our communities have pulled together through this epidemic so far. And it's a delight to know that we're out of lockdown at the moment. Those are all the speakers that we've got tonight, but we have received one written submission, which I'd like to ask Mr. Richard Clifford to read out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a written submission that's been submitted by Angel Callian. Beginning of statement, context. Court references 9CO00038, E91YJ935 relate to just one claim concerning devaluation of the lease. 9 years ago, the court made provision for the loss via damages in lieu of injunction. Because Colchester Borough Council is the lessor, the Borough Council is liable for the loss. Other facts yet to be combined with those offered by the monitoring officer. On 30th of July 2018, the monitoring officer decided to defend the remedy the court expected of the Borough Council some 9 years ago. 1, to quote the monitoring officer, the council was not endorsing and defending this claim. So it begs the question, what was the legal department of the Borough Council doing 9 years ago? 2, the monitoring officer has postulated that claim E91YJ935 and the council's defence should be considered as something separate from something else. The monitoring officer's sworn defence to damages in lieu of injunction and dated 30th of July 2018 informs the court the legal department has no knowledge of the drainage problems on the council's land, and Mrs. Callian hasn't yet proven her allegations of a history of flooding to the council. I did that 9 years ago in case 9C00038 and to the court. Someone at the leadership level 4 and on behalf of the elected members needs to consider undertaking the process as a damage limitation exercise in the event that further heads of loss have been accruing and also notified. And so awaited is the discovery as to the cause of a failure by the legal department, conclude case 9C00038 for and on behalf of both the court and the Borough Council, specifically when the remedy to devaluation of the lease 9 years ago was damages in lieu of injunction and subsequent abuse of the court procedures. Would the leader and group leaders please confirm how the council intends to deal with this matter and how long it will take the council to conclude case 9C00038 for and on behalf of the council and the court? And the statement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford. I'd like to ask Mr. Weavers to respond, please, on behalf of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will confirm to councillors again that claim 9C00038 was settled by the court by an order dated 19th of July 2011, and that order concluded all matters in relation to that claim. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Weavers. Right. The next one, we've got declarations of interest, councillors. Has anybody got any interest that they have not yet declared on any item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Mike Hogg, I'm having problems with my audio and also with my visual. I'd like to declare on item 7(3) a non-pecuniary interest in view of the fact that I hold a personal licence on behalf of a registered charity. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's noted. Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Is there anybody else?
Councillor Martin Warnes, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I declare a non-pecuniary interest in item 10 relating to the use of the old library bike and for a trading limited, as I'm a board member of CCHL.
Thank you very much. Are there any others?
No, Mr. Mayor.
No more indications, so we take it those are all the declarations.
Sorry,
Item
Mr. Mayor,
4.
sorry, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Roger Buston.
Oh, Councillor Roger Buston.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. I should declare an interest in relation to the item, the motion in relation to building and the like, simply in that I'm a solicitor. I practice in the town, and indeed the matter is very pertinent to what I do, having acted for a number of people on this screen I see tonight. I will be speaking to that. I otherwise have no pecuniary interest in it, save only a professional one. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted as well.
There are no other.
Okay. In that case, we'll go on to item 4, minutes. I'd like to move motion A, which is I move that the minutes of the meetings held on the 21st of October be confirmed as a correct record. Councillors, I'd like to ask if anybody objects to the wording on those minutes. Otherwise, they'll be deemed agreed as a correct record. I'll give you 30 seconds to put your hand up. Tick tock, tick tock. Good, thank you. I think those are agreed as a correct record. Mayor's announcements. It'll be no surprise to you that there's actually very little going on at the moment because of the restrictions and the lockdown that finished this week. But I would still welcome opportunities to meet groups across the borough to champion their good work. The good news, of course, is that better news is coming. There's a vaccine that will be treating the national health workers, frontline workers, and the perhaps over 80s this month. And of course, already we've got the Christmas lights and the shops open in Colchester, which we encourage everybody to use to keep them viable. On a local front, Colchester Borough Council have won yet another national award from the Local Government Chronicle competitions. Their first one that we've already heard about was for the Best Commercial Council. And most recently, they've now been now been chosen as the Best Entrepreneurial Council. So actually we should be welcoming Colchester's fantastic performance. And I'd like to thank all the staff that have been involved with that behind the scenes. It's terribly important that they bring income in to keep our council tax low. Thank you, officers. Item 6, we've got items referred to under the call-in procedure, and there are none. Item 7 is the recommendation of the Cabinet's panels and committees. The first one we've got is the 2019-20 year-end review of risk management. And I'd like to invite Councillor King, who's the portfolio holder for business and resources, to move motion B for a maximum of 5 minutes, but it doesn't have to be that long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My congratulations on your recent starring role as the Town Hall's marketing guru for Colchester. I may just say that. With that said, I move the recommendation contained in minute 509 of the Cabinet meeting of 14th of October 2020 to be approved and adopted. I'll try not to take 5 minutes. At a time of huge uncertainty, and you've described it, Mr. Mayor, among others, effective risk management matters hugely. We have, those of us who attend, regular and enjoyable, for some, conversations at governance and audit. The approach set out in the report reflects, in my view, in our judgment, good, if not best practice. It's certainly as good as I've seen of late and has been endorsed by that committee. They noted, as we all should, changes that reflect issues as current as the pandemic and Brexit, and as fundamental as how the organisation runs itself, our finances, and of course the needs of our residents. Whilst risk cannot be eliminated, particularly in these challenging times, the Council has robust processes as described here and within the register, and yet more important, those processes are used. So the risks alter and change, as does the scoring, to reflect the realities observed by those of us with a responsibility for us all to manage the council as well as we can in the circumstances we're in. So I recommend this in the knowledge that it's good work, if not excellent work, by a good team, and that it's used and applied. Awareness of risk and opportunity is embedded, as I can see, and I commend the motion accordingly, and I shall ask full council accordingly to agree to the risk management strategy and that it be approved and included in the council's policy framework.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. We can now have a debate with speakers for up to 3 minutes each, unless you're happy to agree the motion.
No one has indicated, Mr. Mayor.
In that case, I'd like to ask Council whether you accept this as an agreed motion. Excellent. Any objections? No. Good. That's agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you.
Right. The second item we've got to consider is the review of remote digital council meetings. And I'd like to invite Councillor Pearson, Chairman of the Government and Audit Committee, to move motion C. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I move that the recommendations contained in draft minute 229 of the Governance and Audit Committee meeting of 20th October 2020 be approved and adopted. It's been a few years now since we started the move to digitally working as a council, and I think I think we've gone a long way to making our activities much more accessible to the wider public by doing so. It's unfortunate that it's taken a pandemic to move us even further into the 21st century and provide video links of our activities, our meetings, so that the residents of Colchester have an even better view of what we do on a regular basis. The document that was reviewed by the Governance and Audit Committee was quite substantial. All councillors had the opportunity to contribute to a survey. All officers were given an opportunity to contribute to a survey of the digital working. We've had training for all councillors in using visual meetings. We've had briefings on how best to operate. And I think that most of us, if not quite all of us yet, will recognise that this is a way to go in the future. There are protocols that we've considered, and there are a couple of suggestions for members to consider. I noticed this evening that there's still one or two of us who haven't learned yet to mute our mics at all times. So I think that's something that we will get more used to as we carry on. There's lots of information in the material that went to Governance and Audit, but rather than spend any more time, I'm just going to remind everyone of the recommendations to full council. The first one of those is that all meetings continue to be remote by default, live streamed by YouTube for the remainder of the municipal year, to be kept under review in light of evolving government guidance, that all briefings for committee and panel chairs and group spokespeople be held remotely, that the possibility for hybrid and face-to-face meetings be considered when both government guidance and legislation permits, that chairs of meetings retain the flexibility to determine how formal votes are conducted, taking into account the following principles. And I note that you've done this already this evening, Mayor. Non-controversial items be agreed by the chair, asking participants to indicate whether anyone is against a proposal. Where the subject matter is controversial or relates to a quasi-judicial matter, a roll call of councillors be taken to ensure transparency. And that chairs of meetings retain the option of being physically present with officers as required. And finally, that government be lobbied to extend the regulations to enable remote and hybrid meetings to continue beyond May 2021. I trust that most, if not all of us, will agree to the recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson. I think it's correct to say that the government mandate, if you like, runs out on May the 6th. So it will be reconsidered by this council before that, I believe. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. So we could now have a debate if anybody has any strong views.
Councillor Hazel.
Councillor Hazel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Yeah, I am very concerned about these proposals. I noticed Councillor McCarthy's comments in the survey, and his views reflect my own. I do believe the public need a venue. They need somewhere they can come and they can have their say in public with real councillors. I don't see a problem with allowing remote for people to actually access a council meeting by remote if they wish. But if they wish to attend the town hall, I think they ought to be able to. I do believe that all the council committees and certainly full council should return to the town hall as soon as COVID-19 permits. And I am particularly concerned that the planning committee could be considered to be sufficient remotely. I think planning is a particular case in point. It's often complex and controversial. And I believe people, members of the public, get very stirred up about the planning decisions that are made. And I do believe they ought to be allowed to attend the town hall in order to voice their concerns. Going forward, I'm quite happy to see training sessions and briefings remotely, but I do believe as councillors, we need the public to know that we're where we are and we're actually working on their behalf. Thank you. So I will not be supporting this motion because it concerns me greatly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Willits, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Willits, please. 3 minutes maximum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the Governance and Audit Committee, I will be fully supporting the recommendations from my chairman. He put them forward so excellently, and they are all so simple and understandable. COVID has changed the way the country does business forever, I think, in my opinion, and no more so than in the case of local authorities. And broadly, you can split the meetings we have into two types, the physical meetings. There are the long and there are the short. The long ones, Mr. Mayor, without criticising you, tend to be interminable, full council meeting and some committees, while many of our duties require us to come to the town hall for what one could describe as very short or short brief visits. For instance, doing a presentation at a planning meeting which doesn't take more than 5 minutes, but where we have to travel the length of the borough to get there to do such a short duty. And of course we have a problem because the geography of the borough is not really with us. Some councillors live within a short walking distance of the town hall or a quick e-scooter ride to get there. Others live in the most further parts of the kingdom, Mersey, Tiptree and so on. And we also have a sustainability issue, an environmental issue. I can go to the town hall, I normally go to the town hall by car. I can go by bus, and it's easy to get to the town hall from my home by bus for a 6 p.m. meeting, but it's rather more difficult to get home by public transport at the end of the meeting. In fact, if I used public transport, I would probably have to get the bus home the following day and bunk up in the George overnight. And I think all these considerations are very relevant to the future of digital meetings. Clearly, Mr. Mayor, the solution is a hybrid option. Council meetings and the theatre that we have of the performance this evening, we should all be striving to attend in person. But for short attendances, meetings, visits, briefings and so on, we should move to a hybrid arrangement. So I think, Mr. Mayor, the most important of these recommendations is recommendation H, that we lobby the government strongly to have the regulations extended so that we can continue with hybrid and video meetings indefinitely into the future. In city centres, perhaps for those sort of councils, it isn't necessary, but in an area of mixed urban and rural area like Colchester, it should be done. And I just hope that the portfolio holder for resources, in his back pocket, he has the cash to buy half a dozen 150-inch monitors like they do in the Houses of Parliament and string them up around the chamber so that those members who want to go to the town hall can do it, and those who think their time is better used by zooming in as and when necessary can also do it. And we're all happy with the way hybrid systems work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. We have Councillor Dundas next. 3 minutes, please, maximum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do endorse the decision of the Governance and Audit Committee. Of course, it's made up of wise and considered members And we did actually have a very good discussion on the night about a number of aspects of it. As we're hearing tonight, that there are a huge range of views on digital meetings, and they cut right across groups. Personally, I think actually the majority of members are in favour of their continued use to some degree, particularly for briefings, visiting councillors, and councillors who can't attend for work or some other reason. You know, we have a considerable percentage of members here work full time. Some of them work some distance away, and on occasions they struggle to get to the town hall for 6. And if you actually look at the statistics, we've had a much better attendance at committees during the online period, to call it that, than we have in the past. Councillors have been able to attend from all sorts of locations. Some actually have dialed in from abroad. Although I'd have to say from personal experience, if you try and give a speech full council from a tent, make sure there's no wasps in the tent before you start. But I don't actually think a 100% online solution is really acceptable for the council or the public. And I was in agreement, particularly with Councillor McCarthy, over full council when we discussed it at Governance and Audit. So really just in summary, I think the statement from Governance and Audit it's a very sensible approach. It doesn't set us on any particular path, but what it does do is lay out some sensible ground rules for further consideration of the subject, depending on what is allowed nationally after May, which may be that we have to go back to how we were. We don't know. And I'll certainly be supporting it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Councillor Scott Boutell, please.
Thank you. I'm just looking, and as a deaf person with speech, I find virtual meetings quite difficult, especially when you're broadcasting from grand jury room and quite away from the mics. It's very difficult to make out what you're saying. I noticed that it was suggested that officers undertake further work on potential provision of more sophisticated equipment to further support remote or hybrid meetings. That I really welcome. But I was saddened to read it was noted that there was currently no budget available to fund this. So I just wanted to make this comment so that it's noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barber next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the recommendations in this particular motion. I think that the hybrid option is the most appropriate going forward. For some of the reasons already mentioned this evening. I think obviously some of this is down to what the government do, Parliament do after May, but there's aspects of the council that's been alluded to already, such as briefings, training, you know, and the like, meetings with officers that certainly can continue online, particularly where appropriate to do so, and it's not necessary for whatever reason to be in person. I think most prominently, visiting councillors to committees, assuming there's no legal barrier for us to do so, I think in perpetuity should be remote access allowed. Obviously, I think a lot of this is down to the choice of the individual councillor. So if they want to come along in person, that is their prerogative. They're obviously more than welcome to do so. But I think it will open up the council to a more diverse membership in the long term if we can offer facilities to allow councillors to make representations on all sorts of committees in remote fashion. Because, for example, I can go to a committee for wanting to speak for 2 minutes, and I have to spend potentially hours just sitting. And while it's fascinating listening to many of the debates, ultimately there is other work we could be doing in the evening for our residents that could be more effectively used than me sort of just sitting there for 2 minutes, waiting hours for a 2 minute sort of comment or question. So I think there's merit there. Full council, I think moving back to in person for them, I would support, because you know you want the senses of the meeting. You know, you want to stare your enemies in the eyes when you do your speeches and everything in the debates. But ultimately, there is a lot of agreement in person. We have a lot of discussions in person, and we don't have those now when we're remote. There's a lot of work done, rightfully or wrongfully, in person in the corridors of the town hall in between discussions that have led to good outcomes for our residents. So there is merit there in moving back to full council. Something that is beyond the scope perhaps of this debate, but I am interested in what our officers are doing as a long-term programme, what we're envisaging for our officers. Are they remote working long-term? Not least because we have quite a lot of real estate where officers are working, and what maybe we'll be doing in that regard. I'm sure we'll be leading by example. by what we're doing may reflect on what a lot of the officers are doing. But for me, hybrid is the best way. I think it gives a bit more freedom to councillors to be able to represent their residents how they think is the most suitable. Ultimately, if you're useless, you'll get voted out. So if you do the wrong thing, I guess you'll be chucked in the bin sometime. But I do think the autonomy that remote working can give is most welcome, and I fully support the recommendations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gerard Oxford next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the online meetings are very beneficial. They're beneficial from an environmental perspective for a start off, because we haven't got everybody travelling in from all over the borough to come in for meetings. But also, one of the things that I do think, and I heard what Councillor Scott Boutell has said, it's very, very important that people with disabilities have the correct equipment to be able to contribute to meetings to the max. And so I actually think that the online meetings should continue, and that's all meetings. So I'm sorry I disagree with Councillor Hazel, but that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
Good evening. I share Councillor Hazel's view that certain meetings shouldn't be virtual. Do it at parish level, but trying to keep up with a planning application on screen when you've got a regular sized computer is just impossible. And it is such an emotive subject, and it's so important a decision that we're making. I think we need to be face to face with the public on it. For personal reasons, I love being virtual. I don't have to drive in. I don't have to organise childcare. I think they're fabulous, and I can swear at you all when I'm on mute, which is even more fun. But I honestly don't think it's the way forward long term.
Thank you very much. Councillor King next.
Mr. Mayor, just very briefly to say personally, looking at the wider trends as well, we're going to have some form of hybrid arrangement. I think if we're mirroring the wider world, regardless, of course, I'm here to support the committee in their findings. And so I wanted to pick up on a couple of honourable observations about the need for a budget. And of course, we will talk to officers on the back of the decision tonight to look at how and when we make decisions on equipment and purchasing, reflecting the wider context than whatever government decision we get. But I suspect it's going to allow for hybrid in some form. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roger Buston next. 3 minutes, Roger.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I would suggest, having heard what all members have said, that there are no wrong answers here. Everybody's got a perfectly valid view, and every view is something that we could take account of. Nonetheless, I think the committee's response is considered, and I think it is worthwhile. There are some items where clearly being face to face and being able to smell the coffee and see people in the eyes is very important. But there are other occasions, frankly, as Councillor Barber, for example, pointed out, where you can spend hours and hours and hours just sitting around waiting for your 2 minutes. And that frankly is a waste of everybody's time. Whether you're actually going to go home and spend the rest of the night doing residents' matters or not, frankly, we're all volunteers. This is not our full-time paid job, and we should be mindful of that as well. We also don't want to breed, I suggest, a complete issue of councillors who have nothing else to do in life but be councillors. It's very important to have people that actually have normal jobs and have to go out to work, and being able to remotely work like this sometimes will help and facilitate those people and enable them to have their say and join in our deliberations, whereas otherwise they might not have been able to do that. So thank you for that. I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. At the moment, I have no other speakers. I would just comment, as I said earlier, that obviously with the pandemic at the moment, we have the vaccine on the way, but we have to put the lives of our residents first. And however frustrating it must be, not being able to attend meetings, it's important to stay alive. That's the priority. So Councillor Pearson, if you'd like to sum up, please, for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think your point there is the one that we all need to abide by at the moment, isn't it? And that's why we are doing, and we have done what we are doing since March. So although whilst I have a lot of sympathy with some of the remarks that have been made this evening by Councillor Hazel and Councillor Luxford Vaughan, and I enjoy the theatre of the council chamber or the moot hall, I think, as much as anyone. We just have to face up to the fact that at the moment, and at least for the immediate future, we cannot safely meet en masse at the town hall. I know that there were concerns expressed even about the small group of you meeting there in the grand jury room. So I think we have to take that account of all that. I hope that we will move to some form of hybrid meeting mechanism once we've managed to control COVID-19. I thank Councillor Willits for his support. I also noted Councillor Dundas's remarks about the wise members of the Governance and Audit Committee. But I'm also mindful of Councillor Scott Boutell's comments about the difficulties for individuals who might have a disability, and in particular a hearing disability, when it comes to digital meetings. So I hope, I heard Councillor King suggest that he might be able to find a little bit of money somewhere to assist, and I hope that certainly assistive technology would be at the forefront of anything that we provide for both members and for officers to assist with the digital working in which we all find, digital working world in which we all find ourselves at the moment. Finally, I think there were a number of councillors commented about the environmental benefits of meeting remotely, and I welcome those. I know I tend to work in the centre of town, so walking quickly from my place of work to the town hall of an evening is not too difficult. But I think for the majority, the overwhelming majority of councillors, it does mean a carbon footprint. And given the sentiments that we've already expressed at this council, we should be doing our utmost to reduce that carbon footprint. So yes, I do welcome the comments about coming back, having face-to-face meetings of a sort when it's safely possible to do so. But I think we also need to take account of the advantages that we've learned from digital and remotely meeting. There are certainly some benefits from remote meeting, and I know that those have been expressed this evening, so I won't dwell on them. I would just say to Council, I hope that, as I said in my opening remark, most of you, if I recognise not all of you, will support the recommendations before you this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson. Councillors, you've heard the debate. There are a few variable views, but does anybody object to the motion? Otherwise, it could be agreed. Does anybody object? We've got Councillor Hazel objecting. In that case, we have to have a roll call. So, Mr. Weavers will call out your names.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we'll have an alphabetical roll call. If you could please get ready to unmute your mic as I come to you. Councillor Barber.
4.
4. Councillor Barlow.
4.
4. Councillor Barton.
4.
4. Councillor Bentley.
4.
4. Councillor Bourne.
4.
4. Councillor Buston.
4.
4. Councillor Chillingworth.
4.
4. Councillor Chua.
4.
4. Councillor
Yes.
Coleman. Councillor Coleman.
4.
4. Councillor Cope.
4.
4. Councillor Corey.
4.
4. Councillor Crowe.
4.
4. Councillor Dundas.
4.
4. Councillor Elliott.
4.
4. Councillor Ellis.
4.
4. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Gocher.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Harris.
4.
4. Councillor Hayter.
4.
4. Councillor Hazel.
Against.
Against. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor Hogg.
4.
4. Councillor Jarvis.
4.
4. Councillor Jowers.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Liddy.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Littlemore.
4.
4. Councillor Loveland.
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Fiona McLean.
4.
4. Councillor Jackie McLean.
4.
4. Councillor McCarthy.
I will abstain.
Sorry, was that an abstain?
Abstain.
Right. Councillor Moore.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Beverley Oxford.
4.
4. Councillor Gerard Oxford.
4.
4. Councillor Pearson.
4.
4. Councillor Scordis.
4.
4. Councillor Scott Butell.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Warnes.
4.
4. Councillor Whitehead.
4.
4. Councillor Willits.
4.
4. Councillor Wood.
4.
4. Councillor Julie Young.
4.
4. The Deputy Mayor.
4.
4. And the Mayor.
4.
4. Thank you. That's 42 for, Mr. Mayor, 1 against and 4 abstentions. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weavers. The third review we've got of our committees is a statement of licensing policy. So I'd invite Councillor Harris, who's in chair of our licensing committee, to move motion D for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much and good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have great pleasure in moving the recommendation contained in draft minute 121 of the licensing committee meeting of the 11th of November for it to be approved and adopted. I won't take 5 minutes, you'll be pleased to know, Mr. Mayor, but I will just add a few words, if I may, just so councillors that are not on the licensing committee are aware. Under the Licensing Act 2003, this council and every council needs to review and re-adopt a policy, a statement of licensing policy every 5th year. And this is it. This is for the 2021 to 2026. And that's not to say, councillors and Mr. Mayor, that you don't do reviews during that 5 years and fine tune. Of course we do. But there's quite a few amendments on this document that I would salute the committee and my vice chair, Councillor Hogg, for considering. And also, I ought to say very hastily that the work of our very excellent licensing team at Colchester Borough Council, who I think are second to none in presenting the report.
You press to say you're going to speak.
And I was very pleased that the meeting that all the committee members felt very pleased with the report that was before them. There's 14 or 15 changes to it, minor though they were, and to spell out, of course, we went out to consultation and there was no, not surprising, of course, no feedback at all from the consultation because of the COVID situation over the past few months. Now,
That, of course, brought uncertainty to our minds, and we agreed that in the future we would have further reviews when COVID is behind us and the pandemic is more under control than it is at the moment, because what the licensing trade does, the licensed trade does and does not do, both now and in the future, is integral to our success as a town, isn't it? So apart from the few minor changes like the bid, some changes about the adult entertainment and location, some definitions in there, and a couple of pleasing amendments. For example, Colchester Borough Council licensing policy now refers that we would expect businesses to tidy up the front of their premises for litter, etc. Now, all those things are in there. I'd recommend it and salute this policy to you and ask you to vote for it. It's a work in progress. As I say, it's not the end of it, but I do thank the licensing team and the licensing committee for all the work they've done on this. So I formally move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. We now have Councillor Helen Chua to start the debate.
Right, it's you.
Mr. Mayor, I have to apologise. It's actually Councillor Mike Hogg.
Oh. I accept
I do apologise. I've dashed up the stairs. My iPad has crashed and I have no audio and no visual. So I'm now dashed up there and I'm sitting in Councillor Chewer's office. Mr. Mayor, I speak in support of the chairman and the statement of licensing policy, which when agreed, will impact upon the business and social life right across the borough for the next 5 years. However, I'd like to remind members that this document has been updated, consulted on and steered through committee by our officers whilst carrying out their education and enforcement roles over COVID-19 through 2 lockdowns. And I'd like to thank them for the enforcement and action they've taken in my ward in particular. We have excellent officers, and in particular John Ruder and Sarah White. I commend our officers to you, and I commend this statement of licensing policy for the members. Thank you very much, and apologies for having to dash up the stairs.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Are there anybody else? Any other speakers? In that case, Councillor Harris, would you like to sum up?
I just want to thank Councillor Hogg for those comments. He's absolutely right, of course, and I fully support what he said. And I would ask the members to please adopt this policy now by full council.
Right, thank you. Councillors, because it's a quasi-judicial committee, we have to have a named vote. So, Mr. Weavers, he will be a councillor one day. Mr. Weavers will call your name out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barber.
4.
4. Councillor Barlow.
4.
4. Councillor Barton.
4.
4. Councillor Bentley.
4.
4. Councillor Bourne.
4.
4. Councillor Buston.
4.
4. Councillor Chillingworth.
4.
4. Councillor Chewer.
4.
4. Councillor Coleman.
4.
4. Councillor Cope.
4.
4. Councillor Corey.
4.
4. Councillor Crowe.
4.
4. Councillor Dundas.
4.
4. Councillor Elliott.
4.
4. Councillor Ellis.
4.
4. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Gocher.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Harris.
4.
4. Councillor Hayter.
4.
4. Councillor Hazel.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor Hogg.
4.
4. Councillor Jarvis.
4.
4. Councillor Jowers.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Liddy.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Littimore. Councillor Littimore. I'll come back. Councillor Loveland.
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
4.
4. Councillor Fiona McLean.
4.
4. Councillor Jackie McLean.
4.
4. Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy.
Sorry, at 4. Can you hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah, fine, thank you. Councillor Moore.
4.
4. Councillor Beverley Oxford.
4.
4. Councillor Gerard Oxford.
4.
4. Councillor Pearson.
Leave it on 4.
4. Councillor Scaldis.
4.
4. Councillor Scott Boutel.
4.
4. Councillor Warnes.
4.
4. Councillor Whitehead.
4.
4. Councillor Willits.
4.
4. Councillor Wood.
4.
4. Councillor Julie Young.
4.
4. The Deputy Mayor.
4.
4. And the Mayor.
4.
4. And I'll go back to Councillor Lizzie Moore.
4. Apologies.
4. Thank you. That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Good, thank you very much. Item 4, 7.4 is the Local Tax Support Scheme 21-22. And I'd like to invite Councillor King, the portfolio holder for Business and Resources, to move motion E for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll not use that time. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 521 of the Cabinet meeting of 23rd November 2020 be approved and adopted. Members, this is our one opportunity at least to demonstrate our commitment to the most vulnerable in our community is real by approving an extension of our current local council tax support scheme. It is one of the lowest in Essex, only Uttlesford does better. It helps 9,300 residents in the last count. It will be markedly more than that in the year that lies ahead, given all else that's happening around us as a result of the pandemic and the consequences for the economy writ large and local and for everyday people, for many of us. It brings a huge bill, relatively. For us as a council, it may reach 1.3 million in the coming year, but the administration's view and the view of this council before has been it's the right thing to do despite our own significant financial pressures. And to try and make this real, just think of the impact for those who are most helped. This does help. It's two groups, those who are of pensionable age and those who are of working age. For the latter, this could be an 80% reduction in the council tax bill. And for somebody on a Band D property, that could be over £1,400 a year. It's not hyperbole to suggest that for those who are really struggling, and those struggles for many will get more significant in the months ahead, that could be the difference between it being challenging and being able to put food on the table. So this is well understood, this scheme. Yeah, it's an honourable endeavour. It's support to the most vulnerable in our society. Now, I commend the motion accordingly and ask we agree and adopt this local council tax support scheme effective April 21. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor King, and I'd certainly like to endorse how well the council and the council staff and portfolio holders have managed the pandemic funding. I have nobody wanting to speak currently, so I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay, in that case, the recommendation contained in this should be approved and adopted unless you disagree. No disagreement, therefore it is adopted and approved. Thank you. Number 5, the 5th one, and I believe the final one, is the Officer Pay Policy Statement for 21-22. And Councillor King, you're performing again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try not to let you down again. We'll keep it close to 5 minutes this time. I want to walk through this because of the interest in some of the aspects. So here we go. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 522 of the Cabinet meeting of the 23rd of November 2020 be approved and adopted. This report fulfills a statutory duty for transparency, but this council goes further, as does the report, by providing a very comprehensive analysis and commentary, including what people often pay attention to, which is the so-called pay multiplier. Our pay to senior staff is either in line or slightly below that of peer organisations, and in view of the size of the borough and the scale of the challenges faced, and given that retention is better than many, this demonstrates, I suggest, that we remain an attractive employer, but one who also, taking account of our duty to the public purse, secures a good value for money. Members may have noted that unlike many organisations who have a gender pay gap, ours is in favour of women by 2.7%, although we employ rather more men. And that our council's commitment to the living wage for our staff and our contractors makes a real difference to living standards, setting the example and following through. And that really matters. Some 350 staff and subcontractors and their families will benefit from those decisions of past years that we continue in the present as described in this report. We can be proud of that our council is, on all of the evidence, a fair, open, transparent and good employer who manages, I have to add this, its many challenges well, not least the current pandemic. The only concern I would draw attention to is the impact of a £95,000, this is legislation on which we have, like many, commented, a £95,000 cap on public sector exit payments, which sounds reasonable at one level, but has the effect of penalising, or can penalise, long-serving staff on mid-range salaries. Nothing we can do about that, but it'd be right to draw your attention to it. I want to take the opportunity in closing to thank all our officers for their hard work, as many have done before, through an extraordinary year. And I have to specifically mention the HR lead for the council, Jessica Douglas, and her colleagues, because they have been managing people. The senior team have had to manage all the challenges of swiftly responding to the pandemic, and all that means for individuals of giving them care, time, as much sensitivity as the circumstances can allow in moving them through from role to role, position to position, from furlough and back, and then into change which will reduce the number of jobs that we're able to offer. To do that through redeployment or otherwise, so ably to look at the balance of the organisation and work of the council to deliver well is no easy thing, and I know colleagues will understand that. So that's the icing and the cherry on the top of the report itself, which is, as I say, an analytical assessment of where we stand that more than meets our statutory obligation, which this report is intended to provide. I accordingly commend that full council approves and adopts our officer pay policy statement for 21. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I'd like to call Councillor Willits, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this recommendation. I think the policy statement sets out extremely well and clearly just what we're doing and why we are remunerating the various grades of staff in the way we are. Most of, to me, one of the greatest points of interest is the last pay award increase effective from April 2020 was 2%. And I certainly agree with Cabinet that this was a reasonable balance between the endeavours and the reward which we are giving to our staff. And I too give my thanks to the frontline staff for all the work they've done in recent months. And also we've been able to retain senior staff of a most excellent calibre. So I think the balance is absolutely right. Of course, if you look at the statistics, Mr. Mayor, some of our staff may think they have been just a little shortchanged because the public sector wages, according to the Office for National Statistics, rose by some 4.8% compared with their 2%. But of course, most of that was in the National Health Service and a little in police and education. But what is interesting to note is that over the same time, private sector wages actually fell by 2.6% in the year up to April 2020. So we have a position where 83% employment is in the private sector, 17% is in the public sector. I personally welcome the Chancellor's statement that the living wage should increase by 2.2%, and I trust that's built into our policy statement. And also that public sector workers earning below the median wage level of 24,000 would be guaranteed a pay rise of at least £250. And I think that is an eminently good way of rewarding, and trust it will be picked up fully by the council. But I would just give one warning. Although the pay policy appears to be running on an even keel, as expressed in the policy statement before us for approval, we should be just a little beware that there may be some resentment if the 83% of people in the private sector who've had a pay cut effectively overall of 2.6% are being asked mostly to fund the 70% public sector who are expecting a pay rise of some 2.2%. That is over 4% more than the people who are paying most of the bill are actually getting. But nevertheless, with that caveat, Mr. Mayor, I fully support this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corey, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to thank David for his comments. I think they're really appropriate and well said. And for the last paper as well, where we're treating our residents fairly, and in this paper where we're treating our staff fairly. We've been paying the living wage for quite some time now, which has a great levelling effect in terms of the gap between our lowest earners and our highest earners. And I just wanted to say once again, thank you to our staff who have borne the brunt of the crisis, taking on many jobs to help our residents during the coronavirus period that is still ongoing. And I think that's one of the reasons why they have deserved the pay rise that I agreed Councillor Willits talked about earlier in the year that we're in now. And going forward, we are going to have tighter restraints, and the government is going to freeze that pay packet. So I can't really agree with most of what Councillor Willits said, but I did agree with him in the first part, at least, thanking our staff and our excellent senior team who are on the call tonight, who manage the situation along with us as politicians, which can be challenging at times. But also that living wage does increase. It increases beyond usually what the national living wage does. So it's two separate things. So we're usually ahead of the curve, paying more than just the minimum level that the national living wage provides. So I wanted to reassure councillors of that as well. And just say thank you once again. Adrian, as the Chief of Staff of the whole council, the Chief Executive, can pass down our thanks that hopefully we will all pass this policy tonight, agreeing that we do have a good set of staff, we pay them well, and we have a positive gender pay gap at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no further speakers, so Councillor King, would you like to sum up or would you like to go to the vote?
I would sum up, if I may, Mr. Mayor, briefly, just to respond in fairness to colleagues who have spoken, and it could be a longer list of them, could it not? I want to thank the Leader of the Council for speaking for us all in talking about that balance in effect between us as a good employer being fair to our staff and expecting and getting has been demonstrated, a flexibility and a loyalty that sort of shows itself in many ways in their service at every level and in their wish to stay with us as that good employer. That I'm sure will be supported by many. I want to thank Councillor Willits for his observations. We enjoy, I think, the ping pong that's necessary with good challenge. And I actually do have real empathy, as any member should, with the fact that the wage cycles and the sort of challenges for public and private sector can differ, and that can have a consequence to pay packet and indeed to job retention. He will understand that over time these things balance out, and any dipping into any one year, any one moment of comparison, in a sense, could mislead. The principle, however, is accepted, and I hope we're widely supported. We, to be successful, must pay what we should, what staff deserve, what we need to retain them, and do the right thing by them. And I welcome his support, for example, to the living wage and its potential to be increased, and so on and so forth, which of course we would follow the legislation and follow the policy. I think there's two other points I would just make just to finish this off. The first is that we have to take that long-term view, not a short-term view. We are not in the national pay arena to which the Chancellor has control. We have to negotiate, and that's a challenge for our Chief Executive, Adrian Pritchard, and he'll take that forward for us. We will be very alive to the effects of pay increases upon our finances and our ability to retain staff as we would want to deliver services. So we're going to be practical and sensitive, but we all here must give him space to have that conversation without binding his hands. And last point, again, Dennis, thank you for your acknowledgement, as others, of the excellence of our senior team and at many other levels as well. They really do, from my perspective, having worked for too many years in the public sector, they really do stand out compared to some. I'll not tell you where. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor King. So what I'd like to ask is whether anybody objects to this motion. Otherwise, it will be deemed agreed. Do I have any objections? No? Excellent. So that's agreed, and wish the Chief Executive well in his deliberations. Our next item to consider is the review of ethical governance policies. So I'd invite Councillor Pearson, the Chair of the Governance and Audit Committee, to move motion G, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't propose to take a full 5 minutes. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 233 of the Governance and Audit Committee meeting of 24th November 2020 be approved and adopted. I'm sure that every single member here this evening will acknowledge that it's absolutely imperative that this council, its councillors, its staff and all of its partners work to the highest standards of conduct and integrity. Anything that we do in relation to Colchester Borough Council, we should adopt and follow these ethical policies that number scores of pages, and that the Governance and Audit Committee have done the legwork in going through for you. So I don't intend to go into any detail here this evening. They're all set out in the council papers. There is a document on anti-fraud and corruption, whistleblowing, anti-money laundering, covert surveillance, information security, data protection, acceptable use and data retention. It's pleasing to note that none of these policies have had to be invoked over the past year, and that following a complete review of the policies, there are no real changes proposed, save for the Council's covert surveillance policy. We had a visit by the Investigatory Powers Commission's office, and they just made a series of minor suggestions. The inspection was carried out in a virtual way. Policy was found to be sound. and the recommendations that were made to improve the policy were included in the updated policy documents that are before you this evening. So I move, Mayor.
Thank you. Currently, I have nobody wanting to speak on the item. So would you like to sum up, Councillor Pearson, or have you said enough?
I've said enough. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That's the answer. So again, if anybody objects, please indicate now. Otherwise, we will deem it as agreed. Wonderful. It's agreed. Thank you very much. We've nearly done 90 minutes, but we've got one more item to consider local policy, and that's the Local Code of Corporate Governance. And again, Councillor Pearson is going to move motion H.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor, and I hope to be even shorter this time. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 235 of the Governance and Audit Committee meeting of 24th November 2020 be approved and adopted. This is the review of local code of corporate governance. No significant changes have been made to the code this year. It's been updated just to reflect some of the strengthening of compliance principles. It's also included the implementation of the 2 new panels that have been established by the council, the policy panel and the environment and sustainability panel, together with community engagement via the digital access programme, electronic training for officers and councillors, and also the council's response to COVID-19 and our recovery plans. I recommend, Mayor, that the council adopts and approves this local code of corporate governance.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. And again, you seem to have convinced the whole council. I have nobody wanting to speak on it. So unless anybody objects, I see no objections. Therefore, it's agreed. Thank you. We've now been going for 88 minutes instead of 90. So I suggest that we will resume this meeting at 22:08. So enjoy your comfort break of 10 minutes. Thank you.
David, your mic is open.
Good evening, councillors. Welcome back. I'm not sure you heard my first speech, so I'll repeat it. The subject matter of this motion on reducing inequality relates to an executive function, which, in accordance with Council Procedure 11.2, it would stand referred to Cabinet. However, I will now invite Councillor Bourne to move the suspension of 11.2 to enable the Council to debate and determine this motion. Does anybody object to Councillor Bourne doing that? So we may debate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council Procedure Rule 11.2 be suspended to allow for the motion on reducing inequality to be debated and determined.
Do we have any objections to that? No? Okay, in that case, Councillor Bourne, you have 5 minutes to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the motion on reducing inequality, the details of which are at pages 5 to 6 of the agenda for this meeting, be approved and adopted. And Mr. Mayor, I cannot thank enough the speakers that we had this evening under Have Your Say item. Rarely do we have 4 speakers with such insight and knowledge and passion for they are experts. They see the crushing effect of inequality in their work every day. With Alison Andreas, Principal of Colchester Institute, identifying the link between education and economic well-being. With Ed Garrett, the Executive Lead for Suffolk and North East Essex Integrated Care System, who is right to point out the existing inequalities amongst our population has been a slow unfolding pandemic over many years. With Tracy Rugling, the Chief Executive of Community 360, talks about accelerating the assets available to us on the ground and place-based asset making. With Una Corrigan from Anglia Ruskin University, who's undertaken a large piece of research and will be undertaking some more research within North Essex, North East Essex, focusing on community assets. I think that really started us off really well. What do we know about inequality? Well, health outcomes get worse every step down the social ladder. Inequality is socially corrosive. It makes people desperate. It makes people desperate for their families, their loved ones, and for themselves. And there is absolutely no doubt that inequality kills. And inequality does not have to exist. It is a social construct. It's actually constructed and made worse by people like us, decision makers. And it's time that we did more about it. We're well placed in Colchester, Mr. Mayor, to address inequality. We have had a cabinet and an administration for many years that's taken steps to address this by shifting resources to tackle deprivation, boost our neighbourhood working through community enabling, and supporting our voluntary sector partners in their endeavours to work on a daily basis within our neighbourhoods. Inequality includes physical health and life expectancy. It includes looking at obesity targets. It seems incongruous that the wider the gap in inequality, the wider the waistline. It's about educational performance, attainment, progress. It's about teenage births, about violence, domestic violence, violence within neighbourhoods, and about social mobility. And I'm sure that you'll hear many speakers tonight talking about fuel poverty, child poverty, and all other related poverties. Babies are not born equal. Continent to continent, country to country, council to council, neighbourhood to neighbourhood. We need a borough that recognises the benefits of greater equality. We need to inform public opinion so that the system stays the course and does not veer off into fashionable schemes or initiatives of the moment. A poverty reduction strategy owned and actioned by the organisations represented in One Colchester through reducing inequality can only be actioned systemically. One Colchester has organisations that work in our community every single day, street by street and family by family. It's a long motion, but it's well intentioned. I have put in there, and Councillor King as well, that the Public Health England Strategy 2020, we thoroughly support, and we know that Essex are doing an awful lot of work around that, as is One Colchester. So the 5 resolutions at the end, we would really like to see taken forward. I don't know about others in the chamber, Mr. Mayor, but I expect we all became councillors to make improvements. I want to leave a legacy where Colchester residents don't just exist from one day to the next, hand to mouth, but they live fulfilling lives, making the most of the opportunities that we craft together, and that starts here. I hope you will all support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. I'd like to call Councillor King, who's the joint mover of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bourne has made, as we all would expect, an eloquent case for the motion, as how our distinguished guest speakers have your say. That they spoke at all, for me, is a reflection of real progress in relationships and a new alliance working, which offers real prospects for the borough. For, let's be frank, resources do matter, inward investment, yet more important, sometimes better working, better system working, better understanding of cause and effect, and the options and possibilities that are available for us. A richer understanding of challenge opportunities and how health, activity, well-being, both physical and mental, are deeply linked to poverty and deprivation. This is the work of many years if we tackle this seriously. What we are proposing today as a political way, because it recognises what binds us all to leave life better, is this motion as a step towards action. And that's really where I'd spend a minute or two before I make way for others who I know will want to talk on this matter. Now, I wanted to stress, as others have touched on, the pandemic. It is already widening inequalities, impacting ethnic minorities more than others. It's impacting, or will, employment, the hours available to work. It will affect, therefore, income, and therefore it will affect health. But I want to be positive about this and just suggest to us all that tonight alone, we, by our actions, have just affirmed how we can make some difference. Now, as a fair employer who helps the least well paid and spreads that best practice down the supply chain, and by agreeing to council tax support, which is not a small matter for those who struggle, whether they're OAPs or the least well paid and the most vulnerable. The last point for me, Mr. Mayor, is just to say, given the role I have on behalf of my colleagues in Cabinet, if this motion is passed and supported across the chamber, as I hope it will be, is to commit myself and us to making this real. There's lots of great work already in train, but we will need to ensure that we have the disciplines, the governance, and a measure, I suspect, of resources to make sure that we track and scope the challenges, help see the ways in which we might work together better with the kind of partners and others represented at Have Your Say, and between us make a really significant difference to narrowing those many and widening inequalities. That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I've got Councillor Mike Hogg or Helen Shure. I'm not quite sure which.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's me. Sorry. Right. Thank you. Right, I'm speaking on behalf of the East Suffolk and North Essex NHS Foundation Trust as the state governor on behalf of Colchester Borough Council. As you are all aware, there are many Black and ethnic minority people working as the staff of all grades in the hospital. And the SNF NHS Trust has a group of Black and ethnic minority group formed, elected chairman and deputy chairman, and they have held group meetings and discussions with the chief executive and the chairman to listen to their views and to discuss with them and seek assurances and support on their working conditions, their well-being, and supporting each other and their colleagues at this critical time in the health service. And as you all know as well, that there are a large group of Black and ethnic minority staff working in the hospitals in and out of hospital. This group have got the support of the board of directors and the board of governors for this information, for this formation, and for us to hear their views on the caregiving of their patients and acknowledgement of the individual families. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chua. Councillor Mark Corey, the leader of the council.
Thank you, Mayor, and it's always good to follow Councillor Chua with her real life experience and representing others tonight. I'd just say she's reminded me just to declare my interest as a member of the CCG board as a non-executive director, but actually that interest is mutually beneficial to this cause tonight. And I thank Tina for bringing it to us and for David working alongside her. And really, like Tina, thank those partners, those really important people who've come along tonight. There's many others who work in partnership with us, who change lives in education, in health, in voluntary services, and with the professor from the University of Anglo-Ruskin University for the work that she's already done with us. And what I wanted to reassure councillors as well is it is on our radar and has been for a number of years. And I know Councillor Bourne in her work on Cabinet, former Councillor Annie Feltham, the work that they did to kickstart some of this research, looking into what problems we have and why, and trying to start turning the ship on improving life opportunities, improving well-being, and tackling those causes of inequality. So we are working together with partners, and I get to see those partners who spoke this evening and also others at the One Colchester board that I sit on as leader, representing all of you there, alongside Pam Donnelly. And I want to say thank you to Pam, because she's been one of the key integral people in building the partnerships, in breaking down barriers, in avoiding the sovereignty that people sometimes have when organisations come together. She really has helped to make this partnership work, which in turn has benefited all of our residents and us when COVID hit, because we were able to immediately work together and immediately build on those good structures that have been put in place by Pam and others on her team. So thank you to them. I'm really proud of the efforts that we have put in as a One Colchester partnership, but my pride won't help us tackle inequality. We've got a lot further to go, and I really welcome the motion today from Tina and David to push forward to say, right, where are the targets? What systemic change can we tackle? So I really do support it. In my own personal life as a teacher, I've seen it over the years, only one day a week now, but I do see in schools, in education, also on the NHS board as well, I see it, and in local government, I see how we have to deal with the worst cases of inequality and how we have the levers, as well as with national change, to tackle this, and we have to. So we should lobby for national changes, but we should also use the levers in our hands locally to work on it. So I very much support this motion and want to assure you that I will take this forward with the One Colchester board. As Tracy Rugling talked about, work with the strategies we are developing with asset-based community development, and go further with this motion to have the strategies adopted in this motion to see if we can measure how we're doing and to encourage and motivate others to join us and lead on this work to tackle and reduce the inequalities in Colchester. So thank you to Tina and David for bringing this forward.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Corey. The next speaker is Councillor Lee Scordis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I come to speak in support of the motion, which highlights one of the main reasons that I became involved in politics, which was inequality. It's what feeds my socialism, the reason I joined the Labour Party. I know socialism is a dirty word to some, to others it conjures pictures of a hammer and sickle in Soviet Russia. However, my socialism is rooted in a belief of a society where no child should go hungry, where no child should be woken up in the night as the parents tried to escape the bailiffs, as the bills got out of control, where no parent or pensioner should have to decide between heating and eating, where work pays and those on minimum wage don't depend on tax credits or 0-hour contracts, and where a child's future is decided by their character, their work ethic, and their ability, rather than their postcode or by who they know. It's a socialism that believes in fairness above all, a principle that I believe the great British public believes in upholding. It's never been an idea of socialism about bringing people down to the same level, but a socialism of giving everyone the opportunity to succeed and live a decent life. In this chamber, I imagine it's what motivated the majority of us to get involved, even if we disagree about how we get there. Marcus Rashford's actions have inspired thousands. In Colchester alone, we saw hundreds of volunteers come forward to help and feed families. In Old Heath, we had so many volunteers turn up, we were able to deliver 140 meals in 30 minutes. Now, just to highlight some of the real injustices I've seen, I'm going to read a message out that a resident sent to me the other day. Hi Lee, I really need help and I don't know who to ask. I haven't eaten in 3 days just so my children can have food. All the bills have come in at the same time and I don't know what to do. This is really embarrassing. Can you help? Now, no parent should have to go through this experience or feel embarrassed for needing help. We as a society should be embarrassed that in 2020 this type of experience is still happening. However, for Labour councillors, this is a common message we get. Now, the closure and winding up of Sure Start centres has acted as a catalyst for rising inequality. Sure Start offered valuable advice on managing a family budget, parenting, family health, cooking lessons, training and employment. This has been taken away from hundreds of communities across the country. The scale of the challenge we face is enormous, and as Councillor Bourne says, it's systemic. But we have seen that things can change with the right policies nationally and locally. It's absolutely right, this council plays its part in tackling inequality, working with all relevant partners and MPs. We've already made steps locally with our excellent welfare rights team, housing, and our work with CAB. However, any policies moving forward, as well as having the climate emergency at the heart of them, should also look to reduce inequality. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Scordis. You made some good points. The next speaker is Councillor Martin Warnes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just checking my mic's off. Yes, it is. Thank you. Mayor, I wish to speak in support of this motion. This motion gives us the remit to not only shine a light upon inequality gaps and their wider determinants, but also to build partnerships with the aim of producing a comprehensive anti-poverty strategy to help the most disadvantaged within the communities we all represent. Inequality manifests itself most starkly in poverty. In my contribution to this debate, I'm therefore going to concentrate on the need to promote savings and financial capability. Because the lack of them can significantly impact on a person's quality of life and life chances. Studies have shown that the spending decisions struggling families must make are influenced by their financial knowledge and choices available to them. It is therefore hardly surprising that faced with having to use hire purchase, payday lenders, or worse still, illegal loan sharks, that struggling families can sometimes exacerbate their financial problems. Yet, The empowerment and confidence that comes with the financial capability to make the most of your money and improve your life circumstances is something, in my view, that any anti-poverty strategy needs to nurture and promote. I say this because a study commissioned by the Step Change charity, which supports people with debts, found that a lack of savings increases the likelihood of problem debt. In contrast, researchers have found that households earning the national average income of £25,000 per year and who had as little as £1,000 in cash savings were 44% less likely to have problem debts. This is because at its most basic level, savings can help in emergencies, limit debts and cushion job loss. Likewise, a basic knowledge of financial products and services can have a positive impact upon spending and debt management as well as savings. To do all these things, we need to promote financial products and services that work for those on low income as well as the better off. I therefore hope that in passing this motion, we can work in partnership with others to achieve a comprehensive anti-poverty strategy that tackles the structural inequalities that underpin poverty. So as we develop a strategy, we need to take care that we are understanding the lived experience of the most disadvantaged within our communities. We need to go on to identify the drivers of the inequalities they suffer. I'm just about finished, Mayor. And then promote the protective factors needed to alleviate the devastating impact upon their life chances such inequalities can bring. So in summary, Mayor, as the authors of the seminal book, The Spirit Level demonstrated, more equal societies benefit us all and often have better social outcomes. So please support this worthy motion in the interests of all that we represent. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Warnes. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Julie Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I firstly will declare personal interest as I'm a non-exec director of Anglia Community Enterprise. I listened very carefully to our Have Your Say speakers, Mr. Mayor, and heard their offer of collaboration, which will be vital to our success. In Colchester, 20% of people have no formal qualifications beyond 16. Over the past 5 years, we have seen those claiming out-of-work benefits rise. We now have 14% of children living in low-income households and 2,674 children relying on a free school meal. I want to focus on the economy and how it works. For the 21st century economic story, the state's role must be rethought. It must play the leading role in supporting the household and the market alike. First, by providing public goods that deliver to all, enabling our economy to thrive. We should support the caring role of the household with maternal and paternal leave policies that empower both parents and invest in early years and care of the elderly. We should harness the power of the market for the common good with regulations banning toxic pollutants, protecting biodiversity and workers' rights. Our procurement must have social value at its heart, with community wealth building embedded in all we do. The state should step forward to support innovation. We must remember that for every innovation that makes a smartphone smart, GPS, microchips, touchscreens were initially backed by state resources. There are most likely going to be more than 10 billion of us by 2100. If we head towards that future, continuing to imagine, conduct and justify ourselves as solitary, calculating, competing and insatiable, then we stand little chance of meeting the human rights of all within the means of our living planet. We must develop a new portrait of humanity, define a new economic self, that better serves us all. COVID has been no respecter of power and status. Boris and Trump are proof of this, but we can see the stark differences of being locked down with a well-stocked larder and a garden to that of being in a small flat in a high-rise block waiting for Marcus Rashford to come good. Education is often seen as the way out of ill health and poverty, but this may not be enough as we navigate a future beyond the Sudan army of COVID, with graduates competing alongside with those with no formal qualifications. Through COVID, we discovered there was such a thing as society. We developed new connections and shop locally. The community stepped forward to cook dinners, pick up prescriptions, knock on neighbours' doors and sign up volunteers. We must not lose this spirit of resilience. This has been the hardest time in most of our lifetimes. There is much to be done. Cultures for being in the top 3 towns for suicide is a stark lesson for us all. They say out of dirt all kids grow, and grow we must. Let us rise our tide, and in doing so, lift all our boats.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you. You've had your 3 minutes. The next speaker is Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that there's a lot of good things in this, and I certainly will be supporting it. I think the thing which really is important for me is when it talks about information. It's so important for us to know as a council and actually as individual councillors what's actually going on in our borough and wards, because so often things aren't as you think they are. And the wards we think where there's the real problems perhaps aren't so bad, and ones which we think are fine have got some real problems going on. So I think the twice yearly report suggested in the motion is a really useful tool and a really useful resource. I assume Councillor King has made budget provision for it as he's proposing it, but it's something I think is a really important aspect of this. A lot of the information is out there, but actually bringing it together in one place for us to use hasn't perhaps always been done as a matter of course. I think what I'm basically saying is you can only help improve things when you know what needs improving and where. In other words, as the motion says, shining the spotlight is such an important thing. I also have to agree that I think the invited Having a Say speakers made some really good points. I really have to mention Community 360 in particular. We've spoken about them in private meetings. I know they've done a fabulous job over the last 9 months, and indeed other times, and all the voluntary sector and volunteers. I mean, one of the big problems we've had in Colchester was too many volunteers. And I also have to mention, I know not everybody would agree, but I do have to mention the really good work Essex County Council have been doing, particularly ensuring that the free school meal vouchers are extended well into next year, including Christmas and the February half term and beyond. I think the only other thing I would say is I actually have to agree with Councillor Scordis, maybe not on everything, and I don't always agree with him, but I do agree with what he said, is that reducing inequality and improving people's lives is a primary motivation for any sort of involvement in politics. We might not always agree about the best methods to achieve it or to get there, but I think we actually often agree more than we think we do on what we want to see as the end outcome. I would endorse this motion. I think there's some good stuff in there. There's nothing I can disagree with. I think finally all I would say is that I know we've suspended council procedure, but I think we're actually going to have a debate about being in furious agreement. And I think that obviously once everybody's had their say, I think we can move it to the vote and refer it to Cabinet. But yes, thank you for bringing the motion, and I would encourage everybody to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dennis Willits, please.
Mr. Mayor, happy coincidence that that last week the Governance and Audit Committee was looking at the annual update report on equality and safeguarding, and it's a report that I would commend to all members of the council. It sets out our duties and it illustrates what the council has done in the year to ensure that these mandatory requirements and specific duties are progressing forward. Now I would make 3 brief points. Firstly, a lot of good work is being done by the council in the area of equality, and that is set out not only in the report but also in this motion, and I congratulate all those involved. However, I have certain reservations because the council seems to measure its achievements in terms of the input. In other words, what input we put into the aspects of equality in the borough. And very little effort seems to go into measuring what effectiveness our ideas on equality have actually had. Just how successful is that work? Now, as a scientist, Mr. Mayor, I'm surprised that there is no systematic survey of the minorities and the protected groups to ascertain whether they actually feel safer, whether they feel healthier, whether they feel more equal, whether they feel they're more welcome in the community than they were last year. In other words, after all the good words have been spoken in this debate, are we actually moving forward? And are the people we're focusing this effort on believing that their lot is actually improving? And I think it is a deficit in our action plan that we don't carry out that sort of survey and consultation. I would also add that a particular weakness, in my view, is our multi-agency and joint action projects with other authorities, where the principal objective seems to be just to be involved. And we make no attempt to measure whether the CBC input has had any effect, great effect. We just don't know. Now, certainly when we discussed this at Governance and Audit, one councillor suggested that it was just a tad too difficult to actually find out how effective our actions were. But those of us involved in matrix management in commercial industry have to do it all the time. So there's no reason why it shouldn't be done in the council. So I fully support this particular motion. In particular, I support point 1 of the motion, which I consider to be the most important. That is the reports twice a year. But I think these reports should not only say what it is we're doing, but they should also take a stab at measuring just how the position has improved, and the view of all the minority groups and protected groups on how we are moving forward, if indeed we are moving forward. My point is, Mr. Mayor, we don't know. So it's not a question of what, but how effective we are in improving equality. And I think that point is lagging. We're doing good works, but we don't know that it's having the effect that we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willits. My next speaker is Councillor Dave Harris.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you. I am also speaking in support of this motion very strongly. Lots of good speak. I won't repeat what's already been said, Mr. Mayor, but Councillor Scordus absolutely right in highlighting the work of the community and the coordination by One Colchester, Colchester Council, the partners, Community 360, Essex County Council, as Councillor Dunder said, and Colchester Borough Council, Age Concern, Age UK, etc. They've all been a strength, haven't they? Lots of Facebook groups supporting us. In our roles, personally, as community councillors, all of us, I think, in one way or another, have influenced resilience in our streets. I work with a band of volunteers who fetch shopping for friends and neighbours, and they all testify to that community resilience. But this motion does more than that. I think it does some doing things. Now, for me, doing things that we plan to do are what's important. Ed Garrett, as you remember, Mr. Mayor, said, as you'll have your say, Speaker, talked about health gaps having long been a factor in our communities. And health gaps are caused by money, by housing, by work, etc. All those things affect health. But the ambition, I believe, of the Public Health Director, Mike Gogarty, and Ed Garrett is definitely there. And I think with all the partners that this motion talks about putting together to do the 5 doing things at the end are vital. Throughout the past few months, I've seen people who have survived years of austerity measures. The Mayor, can you still hear me?
We can, yes.
The screen went funny for a second. Living a few pay packets away from poverty. They actually crossed that line from being a page packet or two in the front of poverty to actually crossing the line. And they realised with a stunned reality that they were changed from donors to the food bank and to local charities to being the actual recipients handouts to keep body and soul together. To personalise it, Mr. Mayor, that lovely family member said to me how they felt ashamed to be without necessities of life. It took some convincing, Mr. Mayor, on my part to explain what they were going through. Many others had gone through before them over the past decades. So for me, it's totally about those 5 things at the end, and I should be totally, fully supporting any actions that this council does in achieving those 5 bullet points, those 5 doing things, and I'll be urging all the other councillors present to vote for it as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'd like to call the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Tim Young, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tackling inequality and injustice in all their forms is what drives many of us in politics, as has been said by others. It does need conviction and commitment, but it can be done and it must be done. There is, as the motion indicates, much more work that needs doing, and it's appropriate because of the inequality and injustice that they face, that today is the International Day of People with Disabilities. Mr. Mayor, this is a food bank voucher. I've issued over 300 of these personally since March, and other than the usual details like name, address, date of birth, etc., the other part of the form consists of the main cause and secondary causes of the crisis that has led the resident to apply for a food bank voucher. So I can tell you food poverty is a reality, and I can inform members, Mr. Mayor, that by far the vast majority of causes are low income, benefit delays, and benefit changes, followed by debt and delayed wages. I've delivered numerous food parcels to residents over the last 9 months, and I've witnessed genuine need, hunger, and hardship. In some cases, as Lee Scordis said, to families who haven't eaten for days. Desperate people, and that is why the food bank is so necessary at the current time. And I'd like to thank all the staff and volunteers of the food banks and their satellites around Colchester and other charities involved in tackling inequality. We do need to work together to tackle this unfairness, injustice and inequality. Central government, local government, other statutory agencies, some of whom we heard from tonight, and charities all need to work as one. We all need to take responsibility. It can be done. Marcus Rashford, a footballer, has led the way. We need to switch resources into tackling food poverty, inequality, fuel poverty, invest in early years like previous governments have with initiatives like, as Councillor Warren said, savings like Child Trust Fund and Sure Start, as Councillor Scordis pointed out. Sometimes we have to look at the longer term and not just the here and now. It can't be right, Mr. Mayor, that residents in Greenstead Ward have a significantly shorter life expectancy on average than some other wards in the borough. Surely we can all agree that we need to do something to address that. Let's get our priorities right, Mr. Mayor, and unanimously support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've got Councillor Adam Fox next.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm speaking in support for the motion too. And like others have said, tackling inequality and poverty is what drives so much of my politics. But I know that this issue will be of concern to councillors regardless of their party label. We know that locally as a council we cannot do that alone, and I was heartened to hear from some of our key partners at the beginning of this meeting. Like Councillor Scordis, I want to touch on child poverty too. Tackling poverty in families can ensure that we end the generational scourge of inequality that leads to wasted lives blighted by poor educational achievement and poor physical and mental health. At the turn of the century, the nation set out a national mission to end child poverty once and for all. That was a 20-year target, and it should have been achieved this year. And while 1 million children were lifted out of poverty, we have slipped back, and by 2022, it is projected to rise to 5.2 million. For me, it's been a lost opportunity, and I want us to take children out of poverty once again. We have seen the stark reality this year as families seek support to feed themselves. Some people who have never sought support like this from charities or from the state before. As the Cabinet member responsible for housing, I wanted to touch on some of those issues. We know how important housing is as a determinant of health and life chances. Childcare and housing are two of the costs that take the biggest toll on families' budgets. And for those in the private rented sector, we see further and further pressure on rents and on their incomes. We know the impact that some of our own work will do to support
Failed to start the video camera. Please select
families, and we have heard tonight about the local council tax support scheme. Our 100 Homes project will provide a secure roof over the head of over 200 children and young people. And our investment in the fabric of people's houses, making them more environmentally friendly, will reduce people's heating bills and enable them to stretch low incomes that little bit further. Tackling inequality is about much more though, and connecting our communities, reducing isolation, working across the public, private and charitable sectors. I welcome the cross-party support for this motion, but let's not stop the debate today. Let's continue to discuss this. Let's continue to take action and have the debate about what the best policies are to reduce inequality and poverty in our borough. Thank you.
If they've got IT troubles at the grand jury room, I suggest Councillor Gocher, you're next, followed by Councillor Oxford. I'll time the 3 minutes for you.
Okay, thank you. I want to speak in favour of this motion completely. I think it's absolutely needed. I just want to make a few observations. Firstly, you often get people confusing poverty with inequality and treating them as the same thing. Poverty is a symptom of inequality. Inequality is the cause. And I'm very pleased that the motion is about tackling inequality, because it's about tackling the cause, not just the symptom. And I think that's an important distinction. Unfortunately, to be realistic, we live within an economic system that is almost like its central premise is the perpetuation of inequality. And over the last 40 years, we've been on an economic journey in this country where it has become even more about the perpetuation of inequality. So that is the context in which we operate, and we have to recognise that. The way our economy works with the increasing importance or preponderance of the gig economy and job uncertainty is a perpetuating feature, that is behind the perpetuation of inequality. Also, as local authorities, we need to recognise that every time we engage in the activity of contracting out services to the cheapest bidder, we are contributing to inequality by doing that, because the cheapest bidder is obviously going to get saving money by getting their wage bill down the lowest that they can possibly can. So we need to recognise the problem is the economic system in which we operate. What we obviously need to be doing is everything we can locally to mitigate against the negative repercussions of that system. We obviously, as a local council, can't change the system, but we can mitigate against its negative features. Two things I want to add. First of all, as a Green, I want to kind of mention environmental inequality. Access to open space, access to the countryside is something that increasingly is recognised as essential to people's mental health well-being. And some people have obviously far more access to those things than others. I represent an urban ward, and it's vital that we maintain people's access to green space and places where they can walk and enjoy the open countryside. And we don't just create one big urban jungle with people who are wealthy enough to buy the huge expensive houses in the countryside, the only people that are able to enjoy the countryside. So environmental equality is something that is often not mentioned. Second observation, I think it was Councillor Bourne mentioned the issue of obesity. I link that, obviously to low incomes, but also to some of the meals that are served up in schools. There is an issue with school meals, not just in terms of the fact, that they're not always provided in the holidays, but also the quality of some of the food that is on offer. Your chicken nuggets and your curly fries, and the fact that often that's contracted out and sourced on the cheap. I want to see school meals that are nutritious in every state school. Jamie Oliver a few years ago.
Councillor Gocher, you've had 4 minutes now.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Welcome back, Mr. Mayor.
So we've got Councillor Gerard Oxford next. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this motion. I would just add that I was a touch disappointed that the disabled sector hasn't been covered to the degree I would wanted. There are 14 million disabled people nationwide, and many disabled people face isolation every year, not just during the pandemic, because they have difficulty accessing many things, whether it be purely access of buildings and equipment, or whether it be like cuts to benefits, where I've got some residents in my ward whose children were paying for various things that were deemed by the health service to be beneficial to their health, but had to be cut because they weren't deemed to be okay from disability benefit wise. We've got people who talk about how long it takes to do things. The original Disability Discrimination Act came into effect in 1992. We're now in 2020, fast approaching 2021, and there are still way too many places that aren't accessible, and people just make excuses as to why they're not. And you can have simple things like ramps that are not fully compliant and dangerous being put in, or you can have lifts that don't work. Constantly the one in Vineyard Street, for instance, car park, is quite often not working, and other things like that, and also underfoot conditions. I was actually in town today and my wheelchair cut out. It was crossing over between the Red Lion Bookshop and what used to be the Bay and Say. I'm not sure what it's called now. And there was an uneven paving there, and that immediately hit the trigger on my cutout on my motor. So I was stuck in the middle of that road until I could reboot it. So things like that are everyday occurrences for disabled people. And dare I say it, the orbital. Councillor Gocher mentioned about access to the open spaces, but a lot of disabled people can't use the orbital because it's not accessible. So I think we need to actually get real and actually make sure that sectors of society that have historically always been let down are brought into the fore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oxford. We've had a good debate. I haven't heard any contributions against the motion, but Councillor Bourne, would you like to sum up for 3 minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you say, quite rightly, a very good debate with many, many excellent contributions. too many to mention. I'd like to pick out a couple though. Councillor Goach is absolutely right about access to green spaces. We passed a climate emergency motion, which is very wide ranging, but we didn't really touch on inequality during that. And I hope that we can tie the two together better as a council. Councillor Oxford is absolutely right with the extreme inequalities that are faced by people with disabilities in their daily lives, trying to do things that should be just easily accessible. The second bullet point under the Public Health England Strategy 2020 is to reduce the overall rates of, is to advise and influence decision makers, that's us, on the effectiveness of actions to promote healthy indoor and outdoor environments, including their ability to reduce inequalities. That sort of covers that, but obviously it's just a point and we have to make that real. Councillor Young rightly extols the virtues of Colchester Food Bank and what an absolute necessity they have been during this pandemic. Councillor Scaldis mentioning the S word, oh no, and that's not Sure Start, that's actually socialism. Councillor Young talking about community wellbeing, and Councillor Warnes, it was a great help to me in formulating this motion, and I know that he's very, very keen on poverty reduction strategy. And I'd like to thank Councillor King for helping to, this motion was a lot more wordy, Mr Mayor, before Councillor King got his hands on it, I can tell you. I think what we're saying is that our challenge, and I think what we are trying to do, is if we can get this motion discussed in the executive meetings for the organisations that are represented under Have Your Say here tonight, and the organisations represented in One Colchester, we know that then we have got a systemic conversation going on, and actions can only come out of conversations, Mr Mayor. And why this motion now? Because while we have all endured 2 lockdowns, complained about it bitterly, been separated from our loved ones from weeks on end, we will go back post-vaccine to our semi-normal lives. Unfortunately, people living with inequality will still be living with inequality, and that's why this motion now shines a spotlight on those people, and that's why we need to do something about it. I thank all the members for their contributions tonight. It's been a fantastic debate. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bourne. Well, a good summary. I'm minded, because of the consensus across the council, that if nobody objects to the motion, we could deem it agreed. Does anybody object? Excellent. In that case, it's agreed unanimously. Thank you very much. And this would be an appropriate time to remind you that Councillor Barton and I sent an email out yesterday asking for financial contributions towards the food bank on the basis that we can't bring physical goods to the town hall. And please support that. It's a very worthy cause. But we now move on to item 8, the second motion of the night, adoption of amenities for new housing development. And I'd like to invite Councillor Bentley to move motion J, up to 5 minutes.
Mr Mayor, thank you. I won't take 5 minutes. I'm conscious of time, and I think hopefully there will be unanimity on this motion as well. I move that the motion on the adoption of amenities for new housing development, the details of which are on pages 6 and 7 of the agenda for this meeting, be approved and adopted. And at this stage, I would like to say I absolutely accept the amendment. I'm grateful for it, and therefore I'm speaking on the amended motion, which is now the substantive motion. Now, what I want to say at the start of this, Mr Mayor, is this is not an attack on CBC planners or ECC highways or even developers, especially the small and local ones who actually do this stuff pretty well. This is actually sorting something out that I think will benefit many residents, both at the moment and many residents to come as this town and this borough keeps expanding. And it's about us making a difference for many people. And of course, the amendment said, and actually I thought this might be taken for granted, but it's good to spell it out, that there would be support from the County Council, because the person who will need to be doing it is me in the County Council, and I'm putting forward this motion because this is critically important. And yes, we will need parliamentary support because it might need a change in legislation, but I think we can also be innovative around this and make sure actually we can get something done now for our residents and in the future as well. And if we are successful tonight, I would like to, with my county hat on, extend this to the rest of the county as well, because it's not just confined to Colchester, but once again, it would show that Colchester can lead the way. And it is a real chance for the council to make a difference. Now, many residents in larger housing developments, the new ones, are really frustrated. Not a day goes past that I'm not contacted either by email or on social media, and of my fellow councillors in Stanway, the borough councillors, with complaints about the upkeep of green open spaces, flooding, waste bins not collected, roads not made up, pavements not completed, the list goes on. My colleagues will be familiar with just those, if not many. And there's other parts of Colchester too that are currently or will be expanding in the future. Now, the question I'm mentioning here happens to be in Stanway, but said it could go beyond the boundaries of Stanway where there's any new development of any significant size or smaller as well. And of course, it comes down to the fact that these areas are not adopted for the things I've just mentioned. And of course, without the adoption, then we have no authority on the developer to do anything at this current stage. And even we as councillors, although we bang the drum, and I'm meeting with a developer, a major developer in Stanway in a couple of weeks' time to walk through some of these problems, I have no authority over it, nor does the councils involved in this as well. We would, of course, if they were adopted, we'd have the responsibilities, we could get these things done. And that's what frustrates people. And this is why we could actually make the change we need to. And in my view, that change is imposing a timetable with working with the developer, with working with highways, with working with our planners as well. So at the planning application stage, there's a detailed plan of when these infrastructure works and others amenity works can actually be adopted, and people know when they buy their property the end date that's going to happen. Now, it's very important from that point of view that they know that, because of course folk pay council tax. In many cases now they're paying maintenance charges as well, and the fact they pay their council tax in full, they're not getting the same services that the rest of us are getting, because these roads, these open spaces, these waste bins aren't being collected or aren't being made up to scratch as they should be. And I think that if we imposed a condition like that, and I do understand, by the way, coming from highways, that you can have the best laid plans, you can do all sorts of things to make sure they are absolutely accurate and fantastic. The minute you put a spade in the ground, something can happen that changes that. So on that basis, I think we should get developers, give them the leeway to come back to planning, to get permission to extend the timetable, but be very clear about why they are doing that, so residents know, and residents have more clarity than they currently have. At the moment, they're left in limbo. At the moment, we're left in limbo. We have no idea when these infrastructure works and amenity works are going to be completed, because it's part of the planning application, but actually there's no timetable to say when the end date should be. So people generally don't know. And I think that is hugely unfair on people, and it's hugely unfair on our borough as well, as it is across the country. So I think we should be very clear that we need to work in collaboration. We need to be very clear that all the agencies working together, and also the developers as well, can really make that difference for residents, not leave them frustrated, not leave them feeling they're paying full council tax for services that they're not getting. This includes street lamps, of course, as well, because if they're not adopted, then they're run by the developer. If they go out, we're at the whim of the developer to put them right. There's no reporting mechanism that I can see to do that I've come across, and that equally frustrates people. The reason I think I wanted to bring this is, A, to just discuss this as Colchester setting the pace here for others to follow, but also the one thing that councils are very good at is innovation. And we have seen that, colleagues, have we not? We've discussed it this evening, but over the last 9 months, how councils in Colchester and across the country have had to do things very differently. We as politicians have had to make decisions on things we never thought we'd needed to do. So we can do this very well. And local government has set the pace across the country in many of those areas.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. You've had over 5 minutes. You will have the chance to sum up at the end. Although you're minded to accept the amendment, it's only right that I should call Councillor Barlow to put it. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the motion on adoption of amenities for new housing development be approved and adopted, subject to the main amendment, the details of which are on page 7 of the agenda for this meeting. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Bentley for accepting the amendment. We've had some discussions behind the scenes about this, and I'm very glad it's being accepted. And because I think every councillor, when they saw this motion, I'm pretty sure every councillor's had experience of dealing with problems with delays to new roads and new developments being adopted, and the problems we get with that, the amount of emails you'll get from residents dealing with that. But I think one thing we have to be careful on is, if we're going to pass this motion, and the key words put in the amendment there are the practicality and feasibility, we need to be sure that if we're putting something in place, it is actually deliverable. Because one thing I've found when dealing with residents is they're sick of broken promises about, which they get from developers all the time. They get that will be adopted soon, that'll be, they've bought the house, everything will be fine, and then they find that for years they're living in this limbo where nothing can happen, where things aren't getting adopted, things aren't getting maintained properly. And I think we have to be careful as councillors to not just say, oh, we passed a motion, everything will be fine now. We have to actually sort of state that we are beginning, it's a process that we're beginning, it's something we want to investigate, it's something we definitely want to do, and if we want to achieve, but we have to make sure we do it properly. And especially at a time when the government is reviewing planning laws, this is a good time probably to actually suggest, we can come in and here's some innovative ideas we want to try out and test, and we can be a test bed for the country on it. But we have to be sure that these ideas get in there now, and that's why we need everyone speaking up for this, and not just trying to squeeze these changes through one council. Is actually actually make sure we've got proper backing so we can actually do this properly and make the difference in improving the people's lives that they want. So again, thank you to Councillor Bentley for agreeing to accept the amendment, and I look forward to hearing what other councillors have to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bentley, do you accept the main amendment?
I think I said that, Mr. Mayor, but yes, I'll repeat it. I do accept it.
Thank you very much. So it now becomes a substantive motion, and we can now start the debate. I will just indicate that we've got seven speakers at 3 minutes each, is over 20 minutes, but we only have 15 minutes left to debate it. So please be brief. I'd like to start with Councillor Roger Buston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said in opening comments, I viewed this very much from the angle as a solicitor, having acted for a number of members actually in the chamber. So they who have acted for know exactly where I'm coming from in this. It is something that I absolutely support. The only slight problem I would have with it is the number of homes. I would start it at 5 and above. Let us be under no illusions here that the reason that these things are not done by the builders is because builders make money by not doing it. It's as simple as that. Therefore, the answer to that is in the tripartite contractual arrangement that councils need to come to with the builders whenever a planning matter like this is submitted. They need to insist that the builders complete the Section 38 road agreement and bond with a bondsman, and in that agreement, which is a contractual arrangement, the rights and responsibilities of all the parties, including the timetable that Councillor Bentley very ably referred to, is set out very clearly, and it does not depend on you will do it as the 399th house is built, because they'll stop at 398 and not build the last one, because it costs builders hundreds of thousands of pounds, depending on the size of the development, to undertake their responsibilities. So we as a council have a responsibility to make sure that these agreements are properly put together, and when and if they are broken, as they will be, because there's a financial imperative to break them, then our enforcement body, our enforcement arm, not only has the resources to do what it needs to do, but it also has the will to do it. And I've seen instances where I haven't seen quite the will that I would hope to see. So being in full support of this, we have our part to play in it. And if we're going to do that, I do believe we can change the way this actually works, very much in line with how Councillor Bentley has in mind in his motion. So therefore, Mr. Mayor, I will support the motion, and I hope that members can actually agree with what he's said and hopefully take into account the points I made. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dundas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I do support this motion. First, I'd just like to thank Councillors Barlow and Councillor Corey, who was involved in some of the discussions, for some very constructive conversations, which have got to a wording we can all support. Representing the neighbouring ward to Councillor Bentley's, along with Councillor Fiona McLean and Councillor Scott Boutell, I'm very aware of these issues. They tend to appear long before we get close to highways adoption, and they cover a wide range of issues: highways to general build and finish of the properties, the behaviour of the management companies, and to the general incomplete nature sometimes of some of the overall developments. And I just want to say, really, I think it's always important, and I think we're doing that tonight on both motions actually, that we verify we as a council are doing everything we can do for our residents. On this subject, we are the planning authority and they see us as the planning authority. It's CBC's name on the things they see. Yeah, obviously I appreciate we're constrained by the law, we're constrained by the rules, and there are limits to our powers. But sometimes I think we have to be careful of not falling into the trap of always asking others to do things for us. You know, you can end up becoming a letter writing society, always asking our MPs to do something or another council to do something. But we must always examine that we are using all the powers we do actually have. And sometimes we've actually got more than we realise to achieve what we want. So I welcome it, I'll support it, I'll keenly follow its progress to the local plan committee, and I look forward to seeing what comes back in the summer to full council, and it'll be interesting to see if there's anything we can do which we're not doing already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker we've got is Councillor Teresa Higgins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I mean, I will be supporting the amended motion. I would just like to say a few things. It's not just the new developments that got problems, it's problems in developments, including some in my ward. I've been on this council long enough to be part of the Garrison group, which was looking at the Section 106 agreement for the Garrison development, which is now nearly 20 years old. We still have a playground that's not been open for 10 years, and the place is not complete yet. I do think some of this is not just us as the planning authority, it is also the laws that we have to follow. And I know Councillor Cope will agree with me on this. There is no backstops. You know, sometimes developers will say, oh, well, we'll build the community centre when we've built the 200th house. And as another speaker said, so they build 199, and it stays like that forever. I've got another development in my ward on Knightsfield, where there's no children's play area because it's going to be built in the next door development when that happens. Well, no planning application has gone in for the last 15 years, I think. So kids have been brought up on that estate with a small green space that they can't play on because, oh dear, they can't possibly play football there, but there's no playground. So to my mind, a lot of this is part of the developers. They do have to look at themselves as well. They are building places for our residents, and our residents deserve the best. So stalling on some of these things is tricky and difficult. The other place I would cite as being on a very poor development, and that's also partly due to national laws, being close to the town centre, is the Jeff Williams estate, that's the estate down there, because, you know, it took over 7 years to get the roads developed, and of course people people then develop bad parking habits, and as soon as you put the yellow lines in, they then complain. So there must be some way of getting these roads adopted to standards faster, and so that the yellow lines go down virtually straight away, so then people don't develop bad parking habits. So in summary, Mr. Mayor, it's a combination of lots of things. It's not just us as the planning authority, it is the national planning laws that also need looking at to make it better so that we can actually do the enforcement that both Councillor Dundas and Councillor Bentley were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Julie Young, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Bentley will know some of the sites that I wanted to mention in the course of this debate. I very much welcome this motion, especially as amended, you know, to go to the local plan, because I do think we need to consider how we take this forward. I think, you know, in our residents are left in an unsafe condition, and I wanted to just talk about Lightship Way and West Quay for a moment. In Lightship Way, there's a gaping hole in the pavement, and this land is in the hands of the Crown now because the developer went bust. but it was never brought up to an adoptable standard. In the past, the university have paid for the street lights to be maintained, because if they didn't pay for the street lights to be maintained, students going to and from that area near B&Q would be unsafe. So we had a ridiculous situation where the university had to step in to pay the cost of the electricity bill. And we got similar problems in Wivenhoe on West Quay and the dry dock area. Persimmon was part of the developer and Bovis is the other half. So you've got bits of drain that is raised, bits of pavement that is uneven, the maintenance of the dry dock is not conducted properly. And we've had an ongoing legal dispute on this. And even when CBC went to court against Persimmon, we weren't successful. So as others have said, it leaves with councillors with absolutely no tools in the box to be able to resolve these issues. So I do welcome us shining a spotlight on this issue and look forward to the debate as it unfolds at the local plan committee.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Corey, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's very straightforward. I can absolutely support this motion as amended. We all face the issues in our ward, we all have, and following Councillor Young there in Wivenhoe, those issues have been a bane of our lives. So I would definitely support working on a solution to ensure we deliver the infrastructure, the amenities, and as Councillor Dundas said, actually further to that, build quality on housing and other ways in which unfortunately developers do cut corners. And we need to follow through on that. So the motion as it's adopted, thank you to Councillor Barlow and his real practical points that he's made in his speech. I think it ensures that we do work collaboratively together, and I do appreciate Kevin taking that on board. I'll be very happy to work with Kevin going forward. I think Councillor Buston's point as well about it being even lower. I think if we start with this number, but look at actually at what point do we ensure these kind of agreements are placed on developers, because you still may need a new road for a development of just 8 or 9 houses. So I'm more than happy to see this go to the local plan committee to be worked on. We've spoken to chief officers in the planning area who believe this is a piece of work we can conduct in a thorough way. And as I say, I'll support Kevin on this. I'll support Kevin at county level as well, working with other leaders to spread this across the county. So it's more of a joined up policy that we can ensure developers coming into Essex follow, but also to take it further, Kevin, if possible, with the LGA and to government, because we do need to lobby government on this one. Without it, we may see a planning white paper that pretty much walks over anything we're discussing tonight. So we need to ensure those governmental changes to planning incorporate a good solution to the problems that we've all discussed tonight. So absolutely willing to use the council's resources in a good way to solve this problem we all face. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Councillor Lewis-Barber next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bentley, for bringing this motion to council this evening. As a neighbouring ward councillor, I see on some of the social media groups, we're both on your tireless work on this sort of issue, and it's very commendable, you know, how you've taken this to council this evening. I want to draw in particular on the issue of maintaining open spaces, because a lot of good points have been raised about particular circumstances, but less so this issue. And we know from Ordnance Survey studies that culture is in the bottom 10% of all authorities, including metropolitan authorities, for access to public open spaces. Now, we may have open spaces among development, but their accessibility and their quality for residents to use and enjoy is key too. There's pieces of land I can think of in my ward that ostensibly are accessible to residents, but in fact are not very well maintained. And eventually the developer just goes ahead many years down the line and tries to put in an application justifying the fact that the land isn't maintained. So this is the sort of key areas where we can really make a difference to people's lives. We've seen in the pandemic how crucial open spaces are. There is an inequality to open spaces as well. Housing planning comes so key to many issues of inequality. And given the low levels of access to public open space in places like Colchester, less than in places such as Hackney in inner city London, I think this is a real issue we need to get a grip on and make sure we're on top of going forward, because there's a lot more development coming in the council's proposed local plan. We've discussed this in local plan committee before as well, and I'm looking forward to the debates going forward. And I really think that when we do planning and when we're looking at developments, that open green space is a real key issue, because developers always say, oh, well, we're enhancing the natural landscape. Well, it's quite difficult to enhance the natural landscape when you have concreted over a lot of green space, and we see that too often in planning applications passed in this borough. Words, not actions. And this is a motion of action. This is something I'm very pleased to be supporting this evening. But not least, if I can just touch on a final point, which is on enforcement, because Councillor Buston raised it. I think this is a particularly underfunded part of the planning department. I've dealt with many planning of the enforcement team, and they struggle with the workload, and it has a real tangible impact on people's lives, planning breaches. And I really would commend to the Cabinet and the Cabinet member to ensure that this particular aspect of planning is also well funded, because we can do all this, but if developers get away with it anyway, without the enforcement side, then ultimately it would have it could be for nothing. So let's make sure that we have a positive outcome this evening, and make sure that all the other indirect aspects of it that need funding are adequately done so as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillors, I have a proposal for you. We have completed our 80 minutes of debate on motions, but I only have 2 speakers left, and we did mention about inequality earlier in the earlier motion, and this is an inequality in a different sphere. I suggest that we can hear these last 2 speakers and allow Councillor Bentley to sum up. Are you agreeable?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I'd like to call Councillor Scott Patel.
Thank you. I fully support the amended to the motion, because I was really concerned that the original motion could actually, in fact, end up costing our residents more. Colchester Borough Council cannot insist that the play areas are adopted by them with the necessary 106 contributions from the developer. Likewise, Essex County Council cannot insist that they adopt the roads. The assumption in this motion has been made that they will. Now, many developers choose to go down the service management agreement route for the maintenance of public open spaces and play parks. What is in place, or what can be put in place, to stop the developer deciding that the roads will be adopted by the service management company too? This will then be the responsibility of the residents who pay for the maintenance. The end result is that the resident pays both council tax and service management charges. In addition, I've noticed an increase in private roads on new developments, which means that the resident is responsible for the maintenance of the private road and not the Highways Authority. Why is this increasing? Why is this happening? Let's take this a step further. If the developer chooses to pass the cost of future maintenance of the estate roads to the service management company, who will be responsible for ensuring that the roads are kept to and would be of an adoptable standard? Let's remember that adoption is out of Colchester Borough Council's hands, because they are not the Highway Authority. Essex County Council, as the Highways Authority, are the only people who can monitor this, and this could be conditioned. For example, prior to commencement of the development, a detailed schedule and timetable shall be submitted to and agreed by the local Highway Authority as to when works are to be completed. But then, following on from this, what legislation and penalties are in place if the roads are not maintained to an adoptable standard and the timetable is not adhered to? Rather than the onus being put on the planning authority to resolve the highways issues, the resolution should rest firmly with the Highway Authority. And again, I feel it's imperative that the council, that this council requests that the borough's representatives on Essex County Council and in the House of Commons provide the necessary support to further this proposal. It has to be from the top down rather than the bottom up, but I'm really glad that it's going to the local plan committee so that they can be regularly updated. This is not a problem that affects just Colchester, and should be built into legislation that all roads are to be adopted by the local Highway Authority with the supporting funding needed. I fully support the concept of infrastructure first. In fact, I've been championing this for years, along with highways, looking at the cumulative effect of on our local roads from development. I welcome this motion as it highlights the weaknesses in the highways adoption system, and I will be supporting the amended motion as it addresses the points that I've just made. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Finally, but not least, Councillor Jackie McLean.
Thank you, Mayor, for that. I also welcome this amendment and this motion because it is so important for Stanway. We have had I cannot tell you how much development locally, and we have had major problems with the roads and the infrastructure. A resident rang me a couple of months ago saying how he had to stand in the road so he could allow an ambulance to find his way to a local resident. Now that cannot be right because we do not have the road signage on these roads because they're not fully adopted and up to speed. Now I think with Kevin's motion, he will be able to help to enforce this and make it a far safer environment for our local residents. You know, we have had to put up with the most development for most of Colchester, and I think it's so important that we respect the residents to actually help them in these troubled times with having access to all the facilities and not all the problems. We need to hold these developers to account. When they promise to give, they should actually give and make it a safe environment for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bentley, you have 3 minutes to sum up. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. And I'm grateful for all the speakers on this. I think we've really hit a raw nerve, and actually there's something we really can do here. I would just say to Councillor Scott Patella, I think she may have just missed the point on this because there's no suggestion that future meetings we put on to residents at all. In fact, quite the reverse. What we need to do is get a proper timetable in place. Unfortunately, it does involve collaboration. It's not just Essex Highways, it's all of us together because the planning conditions are set by Colchester Borough Council in collaboration with Essex Highways. So I didn't quite follow that, but nonetheless, I accept the meaning behind that. This is about making this a lot better for residents in Colchester, and if we get it right, beyond as well. And if we do get it right, and to be absolutely honest with you, it's the will behind this and political control of this issue, That's why I welcome Councillor Corey's comments. I absolutely will work with him as I have in many other areas as well. Get this right, colleagues. We can build back better in Colchester. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Again, we seem to have consensus, which is a delight tonight. I'd like to ask councillors whether, if anybody objects to the motion, otherwise we can deem it agreed. I don't see any objections, so it is agreed, and thank you for the debate. Councillors, we're 4 minutes off our next 90-minute break. All we have left is questions to Cabinet members and Chairman. What would you like to do? Do you need a comfort break? How about a 5-minute one?
5-minute break, yes.
Excellent. Right, 5 minutes from now. Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Welcome back, councillors. I think, yes, most of you are here now. So we're now going on to item 8, which are questions to Cabinet members and Chairman pursuant to Council Procedure 10. Up to 60 minutes, which will take us just over the 10 o'clock. First of all, I'd like to invite Councillor Barton, who asked a pre-notified question to Councillor Corey. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have 2 questions, if possible, but the first one, as notified, is to the Leader of the Council. I've given several suggestions on the use of the Town Hall Library, which has been empty for some time now. Could I have an update on what measures are being taken to bring this back into use? It's a beautiful room and it's got huge potential. Please, could I have an update? Thank you.
Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Barton. There recently has been a portfolio holder report published on this, so I will pass to Councillor King, who is the portfolio holder, who will deal with this in more detail. But like you, I'm absolutely pleased that we are moving forward because it has been empty for some time. It was empty actually when it was leased. We did provide a lease that was taken up by somebody else, so we were getting commercial income into the building. But then that ceased recently before COVID, and since COVID it has remained empty. We all know what a fantastic venue it is and how it could be profit making to the council if we rent it out again, and it's going to be coming back under Amphora, who will try and make good money out of it. We have received those awards about being commercial and entrepreneurial. I think we will again, and I'll hand over to Councillor King just to add a bit more detail about what we're going to do, hopefully.
Sorry, but Councillor Corey, the question was to you, and the detail is actually on page 43 of the agenda, where the agreement of £53,000 of extra expenditure to the old library to bring it back into commercial use. So if Councillor Barton looks at that, she'll see the detail. Councillor Barton, you have a supplementary?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I had put the question in before that was clarified. My second question, if I may, is to Councillor Julie Young. And I just wonder if she'd agree with me that we should recognise the amazing work that the Mercury staff team, led by Steve Mannix, have done during this pandemic, their dedication during trying times, and they've faced really difficult challenges with great determination and commitment. I wondered, could we as a council write to the Mercury staff to express our appreciation, please? Because this is quite an achievement, believe me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Councillor Barton. Do you want to declare an interest?
Oh yes, I'm a member of the board of the Mercury. Thank you very much.
I just wondered.
That wasn't the reason, but yes, thank you.
Councillor Julie Young.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Barton, for the question. She's absolutely right, and I'm very happy to send a letter of congratulations to the Mercury and their staff for the way they've conducted themselves during this COVID period. We all know that the arts sector has been hit really hard, but despite that, the Mercury have stepped up in a collaborative way to support the community efforts in tackling the challenges that we've had during this difficult time. And they've done that at the same time as forging ahead with a capital project, one of only 4 that the Arts Council have funded. And we are awaiting news of hopefully some good news to come soon, if we're lucky to secure some additional funding to ensure that the project is completed. The news is that they should be finished by the end of January, and they should be open by March, God willing. So all being well, if we all get the vaccine and things change, we can look forward to some better times ahead where we can be entertained in what will be a state-of-the-art facility here in Colchester. And in addition to the Mercury, I think we also owe our thanks to Colchester Borough Homes, who have project managed the project. And I think it will end up with a building we can all be really, really proud of here in Colchester.
Thank you, Councillor Young. And of course, we mustn't forget the other cultural activity centres that we have around the borough, like the Arts Centre and others. We have another pre-notified question from Councillor Hogg. Would you like to ask that to Councillor Goss, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Following a 2-year journey of planning, consultation and design, we now have a brand new fixed equipment play park in Alderton Road at a cost of approximately £40,000, provided and paid for by Colchester Borough Homes, for which I and my residents are indeed very grateful. This will provide exercise and play for youngsters in an area of predominantly social housing. However, given the importance of exercise and play for all young people, could I ask the portfolio holder that, given the present financial situation that the council finds itself in, what is the prospect of similar provision on our existing private estates across the borough in the foreseeable future? Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Hogg, thanks for taking the time.
Councillor Goss.
Thank you for raising this and pre-notifying me of the question. Firstly, well done on the work you did in St John's with Colchester Borough Homes to regenerate a playground that was much needed in that area and will certainly be well received by the residents. To regenerate a playground is roughly £80,000 to £100,000, and that is significant money. So you can imagine we have 73 playgrounds across Colchester that the Borough Council is responsible for maintaining. They have to be visited every month from a health and safety perspective, so that pretty much keeps somebody employed going around the borough checking them to make sure that they meet their ROSPA requirements, because every playground has to have a ROSPA check before we adopt it, if we take it from developers. And of course, we need to make sure that everyone that uses our playgrounds has a safe environment. So that is investment that we have to do anyway. There are, of course, other playgrounds in Colchester that are maintained by management companies. And in fact, that's becoming more commonplace because councils cannot afford to adopt playgrounds and maintain them. So in fact, the management charge pays for that for newer playgrounds on some estates, certainly some in my area, for instance. So to answer your question, there is no funding for regenerating playgrounds, £80,000 to £100,000. The only place you get any capital funding from or any funding for it generally tends to come from Section 106 agreements. So if you've got lots of house building going on in places like Mile End, Stanway, then there is funding in there to improve existing facilities, and build on them and regenerate them. And in fact, we've done that successfully at Mile End. In St John's, you haven't got that. You don't have lots of Section 106 funding because you are what I call a mature and established part of Colchester, where you have nowhere to build new houses apart from, if God forsaken it certainly shouldn't happen, it goes on Bullock Wood. There is no funding. So unfortunately, what we have to do is repair and maintain play areas with the existing funding that we have, the existing resources that we have, and therefore there is not any funding to build any new playgrounds in St John's or anywhere else unless funding is found, which at this moment in time, particularly with a global pandemic and the financial crisis that will bring from government with future cuts, same as 2008, there is no funding. So I'm sorry that may disappoint you, Councillor Hogg, if you were looking for a new playground in St John's or to regenerate others, but unless other new streams of funding are found, I can't actually commit to do that at this time, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. Thank you.
Hello, Councillor Hogg, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only I raised my concerns about private development on Bullock Wood and the farmland surrounding. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Scott Patel.
Thank you. My question's to Councillor Lilly, and it's just a gentle nudge, Mike. you were going to send me a written answer on the question about CCTV and where it was funded from. Could you, I haven't received it yet, so if you could drop something in the email system, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. That actually comes under Councillor Higgins' portfolio, the funding of such in that. So, and I thought that she actually responded to you the question last time. So perhaps Teresa can shed some light on that one as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Higgins, then.
I will make sure that Councillor Scott Buttel gets a written answer.
Yeah. Can you share it with the all councillors, please?
Indeed, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Scott Patel?
No, it was just asking nicely for a proddy poke to be given.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dave Harris next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you very much. Many of the residents in my neighbourhood are, and in Cross Colchester, in fact, are tenants and leaseholders of Colchester homes. Could the portfolio holder for housing tell me and our residents what difference it will make that the management agreement between the council and Colchester homes has been extended for another 5 years?
Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Harris. So at the last Cabinet meeting, we agreed to extend the management agreement between the Council and Colchester Borough Homes for a further 5 years, as Dave Harris says, and that takes it up to 2028. It kind of really demonstrates our commitment to council housing in the borough. And I think what's really key for some of those tenants is that it will mean that we can plan for the long term to make improvements to their homes. And for those people on housing waiting lists, it means we can plan to deliver the new homes and ensure that we can get people moving into those homes as quickly as possible. So, you know, we've got a multi-million-pound plan to build new homes in the borough and for those that really need them. And we've also got a number of plans for spending on improvements in people's homes. So that's kitchens and bathrooms, but it's also about making some real improvements to some of the energy systems and boilers in homes as well, that I know that Dave's residents in Beerchurch will benefit from, but as will tenants across the borough.
Thank you very much. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Harris?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for that.
Okay. Councillor Helen Chua, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the portfolio holder, Councillor Adam Fox. I understand that the paper on greening our council homes went through the Cabinet last week. In practical terms, how would this benefit the residents in St. Anne's and St. John's? Thank you.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Chua, and thank you for pre-notifying me of the question. So it's a £4.4 million investment in council houses, and for residents like yours in St Anne's and St John's, it means things like more efficient heating systems, wall insulation, boiler replacements, and installation of air source heat pumps, and that will have a real impact on the efficiency of those homes and hopefully will help to bring people's energy bills down. That programme of work starts in April of next year. And if we're able to, you know, there are going to be hundreds of homes across the borough that will benefit from this. I'd be delighted to, in a COVID secure way, hopefully visit some of those homes in St Anne's and St John's with you and see the benefits that it makes to our residents.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Chua, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. My second question, or supplementary, sorry, is can we be assured of getting an update on the progress in the ward? And you're very welcome to come and visit the homes, or, you know, social distancing, you know, provided. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely keep ward councillors updated on the progress of that scheme, because I know that where it's taking place in people's own wards, they want to know where those improvements are happening, and be delighted to keep you updated as will other ward councillors too. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Lewis-Barber next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions for two different cabinet members. Firstly, for Councillor Julie Young. In the last full council meeting, you promised a discussion with the local plan chair about my call for a new local economic plan based on green jobs and green manufacturing. Could you provide an update to the council chamber of your discussions with the local plan chair on this matter? Thank you.
Yes, of course. A plan for green manufacturing, green jobs at the heart of new economic strategy for the borough is on the agenda for the next meeting of the local plan committee. That's what you were asking. I'm afraid we weren't able to deliver that, but the people could help draft such a strategy, which is completely tied up in the town deal matters at the present. A new economic strategy will be prepared, but we have got sidelined by the town deal and recovery. So it's something that we will do in the future, Councillor Barber, but at the moment we haven't had the resources to do it, but we will take this forward as soon as we are able to.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Barber, your second question?
Thank you. No supplementary on that. My second question is for Councillor Mike Lilly. In regards to a new device coming out called TrueCam, or a new model of it that the national press have called a game changer in tackling speeding. Tendering District Council have purchased some of these equipment. Could you confirm that Colchester Borough Council is looking into purchasing this equipment too? Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a police use that. I'll check on where the situation is with that and I'll get back to you, Lewis.
Yeah. Can you get back to all councillors with that reply?
Will do.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Right, the next speaker we've got is, hang on, Councillor Dennis Willetts.
Mr. Mayor, my question is to the portfolio holder for the environment, and it concerns Lexton Lake. The lake has been ecologically stable for 150 years, but this year it's covered in duckweed, the fish have died, and it's emitting a foul odour. This is not a rural lake, Mr. Mayor, out in the countryside, but it's in the heart of urban Lexton and has become a public nuisance. Does the portfolio holder have a timescale, I repeat, a timescale, for agreeing the costed plan for remedial work, including the hydrological survey to investigate the unpredictable water flow, the scientific analysis of the water and the cause of its degradation, and the general environmental cleanup? Thank you.
Councillor Goss.
Thank you for the question. I would have been able to give you a more detailed reply had you sent me the question earlier, but that's fine. I had an update on this situation on Friday. So what I can tell you is that a meeting was held with residents. A successful meeting was held with residents in the area. Many keen to get involved, which is very positive to help resolve the situation. I can also tell you that some work has been carried out to date, and I can also tell you that the Environment Agency are taking regular samples of the oxygen levels, and the oxygen levels have returned to a good positive level, and that monitoring will continue so that obviously any future wildlife will be safe and well looked after. There has also been some quotes for some work that have gone to officers, and that's currently being pulled together. And as I understand it, part of the lake is actually maintained by residents and privately on one side, and then the rest of it is down to Colchester Borough Council and of course the Environment Agency from a health and well-being of the wildlife point of view. So that's the update I got, and any further updates I get, I will of course send on. I did actually have a further email today from residents that have been in touch, so they will be getting some further information shortly. So I will obviously pass on any more detailed information I get.
Thank you. And Councillor Willetts, your supplementary?
I think my supplementary is the same as my question. I asked for a timescale for the agreed costed plan, and I'm grateful for Councillor Goss to give me one or two tidbits of what he might do. But what I'm asking for is the timescales for the for agreeing the costed plan. It's that we require, not the odds and ends that he's discussing with folks.
Thank you for your repeat. So I'll give you a different slant and see if you understand it from this perspective. So obviously I've said that we're working in collaboration with residents, and I've said that work has been done to pull together quotes for potential future works. But obviously that will be done in collaboration potentially with the management company and residents, and obviously that will be published and sent. Had you obviously sent me the question, I might have been able to give you a fuller answer on that because officers are working on it, but I've given you the information I have to date. But rest assured that all parties are working collaboratively together to try and further improve the situation.
Quick point of order, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, quick point of order. Can you ensure Councillor Goss keeps ward councillors up to date, because so far he has not, and he's failed in that duty. Thank you very much.
Councillor Barber, you beat me to it. Councillor Goss, I was just going to say regarding the negative publicity that this has attracted and to the Colchester Borough Council's reputation, I think it's important you do keep all councillors informed of their progress and the action. Please.
Yeah, so you can rest assured that any information will obviously be disseminated appropriately. I think it's also fair to say that none of the councillors have actually contacted me on the matter at all until very recently, until the newspaper article actually appeared. So again, communication, I would of course point out, is two-way. But thanks for your inference and certainly intervention, and it will of course be positively resolved.
Yeah, we all want the council to have a good reputation, and thank you for your help in doing that. The next questioner is Councillor Tina Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the portfolio holder for business and resources, which I have pre-notified to him. It's been a week since the Chancellor delivered his spending review, determining how much is spent on public services. Has Councillor King had a chance to ascertain the particular impact on our budget and the impact on support for services that residents currently enjoy?
Thank you very much, Councillor Bourne, for the headline ahead of time. This is still being worked through. It's a complicated equation, as you will understand, and it's linked to losses and our changing view of those. But the Treasury spending review has been helpful for many. It's missed some, but it's been helpful for many. It will be a help to us. It's going to provide us, we think, perhaps a benefit, an offset benefit of perhaps as much as £500,000, which is very encouraging. However, it is contrary still to the original promise, which was that all costs, certainly that's the way it was taken and said at the time, that all costs arising from COVID and all losses would be, local authorities will be supported by government, and it is rather less than that. And as I say, it's a complicated formula. Where we think we are at the moment is facing a budget shortfall next year of towards £3.5 million. But we are doing the things we've said we'd do. So we're taking cost out. We've been doing transformation work. We declared that before it's gone through scrutiny and cabinet some time ago. Implementation is what lies ahead of us. And we're doing our best to meet our priorities, including the need to support business and the town centre. So many members would have seen, and I asked them to share when they do, marketing, including the mayor. That helps to draw people into the town as a good place to shop. That has some benefits for them. It has some benefits for us and for our income. So that's the nutshell of where we're at. Still facing a real mountain to climb, but we and the council team, of course, are on it as described before. We're providing an all members update on Monday the 7th, a budget workshop, the 4th in the cycle, and I hope that that will be highly entertaining and fun, and I thank you for the question.
Councillor Bourne, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, just a brief one, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd just like to thank Councillor King for his very timely updates in budget matters, and thanks to his team for delivering the business support grants. And I'd like to know, will you be supporting, Councillor King, the Local Government Association lobby to central government in meeting the full financial challenges that councils face in funding pressures this year as a result of pandemic costs?
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. The answer to the latter is, of course, yes. In ways seen and unseen, the council lobbies at every level it can, whether at leadership level with the county, directly through the LGA or elsewhere. So yes, we fully play a part, and I think because we have a decent or better than that reputation, we're as likely to be heard as many. But of course, it's collective weight that does make a difference to government when it takes stock. Business grants, I'm grateful for you mentioning that. We have done a great job, the team. In the first round, you'll recall, over £33 million out, and a lot of that out really quickly. The latest round of grants have been publicised. I'm hearing good news about that. Second wave is going out by the end of this week. It will be for some an absolutely crucial lifeline, because so many are in such difficulty. And for any of us who walk through town, through Debenhams, is a classic illustration of a hole that's going to be a real challenge to fill. You have to feel for them, you have to feel for business in general and their employees. But I'll just say this last thing. I think the relationships in testing times are about as good as they're going to be, and many of us have played a part in that, and we'll continue to do our best for them and for the residents they serve. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Lee Scordis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the Chair of Scrutiny, Councillor Bentley. A few years ago, Scrutiny scrutinised the bus companies, and it was a very invigorating meeting. I think people commented on the time that it was probably one of the best meetings we had in years. Progress has happened, but other issues haven't been resolved, and we all have residents who need to use the buses. I was wondering if Councillor Bentley would be amenable to looking at adding bringing back the bus companies to the work programme.
Councillor Bentley. Councillor Bentley. We may have to get a written answer, Councillor Scordis.
Oh dear. Oh,
is there a supplementary while you're at it?
No, that's fair enough, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we will pass that question on. If you could email Councillor Bentley, I'm sure that'd be quicker, and ask him to share it with the whole council. Thank you. The next one is Councillor Martin Warnes.
Thank you, Mayor. In welcoming the planned 4.4 million green investment in the council's housing stock, can I ask the portfolio holder for housing what social value he hopes to additionally gain from the work needed to make our tenants' homes more carbon friendly?
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Warnes, and for pre-notifying me as well. What's really important is that we, with the investments that we're making, and that includes the £4.4 million in greening council homes, but also in the number of large construction projects that we're investing in as a council, is that we retain as much of the wealth in the local economy. So what we're really keen to do is to get small and medium-sized businesses involved in bidding for contracts and being part of the supply chain for those too. I know that you've done a lot of work in the Task and Finish group on looking at the Social Value Act and what we can do to get greater social value from the procurement and from the contracts that we deliver as a council. One of the things I've spoken with officers about in particular is about ensuring that we, where contractors are working on those projects, that they're taking on local people on apprenticeships. And certainly that's something that I hope that we can report back on at a later date in terms of the that social value, but also other things that local contractors provide in the economy, and the and looking at the multiplier effect that the investment that the council's making, particularly in part of the COVID response and rebuilding the local economy, and the difference that we can make as a local authority with the investments that we undertake.
Good, thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Warnes?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nick Cope, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask the portfolio holder for business and resources, can you please update the council on the woodland and biodiversity projects, including the Mayor's woodland? That's to Councillor King, please.
Thank you very much. If I could pick that up. Thank you very much, Nick, Councillor Cope. That's it's a subject you and I have talked about a great deal at different times. And I suppose I want to sort of saying specifically on the Mayoral Wood, how sorry so many of us were that events being what they were, that we weren't able to do it in your time in office. So perhaps with some good grace from your successor, it could be Mayor's plural Wood, and we can proceed, I still hope, in January for that. I think the date that we've got in mind is the 9th of January. And that would be 200 trees by Riverside. There's been a conversation with others about the site and locations. I think that's been sorted now. And it will be from the Borough Council perspective, the first of some 8,000 trees to a cycle of planting that has been sensitively chosen, been delayed by the pandemic, and we have in mind to start in January through February onwards. So that's the narrow answer. The wider piece, and I will keep this very brief, is this is a fantastic project, and it's grown. It's grown from trees to biodiversity to greening the orbital, and I absolutely want to give the assurance, if Councillor Oxford is online still, that the point about obstacles to access is absolutely part of the project for the orbital. So it's a much wider project now, very proud and pleased that it is. Our small team are working really well. They've got a difficult job in trying to find the right balance, but we're the better for it. And we've got what many people will now know, a wider focus on everything from no-mow areas and rewilding, active support to insect life and seeding wildflowers through to where we started, which was a tree planting. So in your time, Nick, from our first conversations, this has moved on a long way. And we're due an update round to members. I do this every now and again. I'll make sure that we get some details round to round out this answer and save us a couple of minutes now. Thank you for the question.
Councillor Cope, do you have a supplementary?
Only to say thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor King for such a comprehensive answer. Only to ask that they're sure to thank the team involved, so the people involved get thanks, because it must be, as you pointed out, especially difficult in these times to follow such a project. So thank you very much for the answer anyway.
Yeah. I would say, as a mayor that's spent my life planting things, I think actually all councillors ought to be contributing financially and by physically planting a tree, and I'd hope Councillor King will take that on board. We could have a councillor wood as well as a mayor's wood.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a wonderful idea. I love the idea of 51 of us in a row with a spade each. That will be a great photograph to take. Some of the planting days have been very well attended. We've had lots of the public, very big community involvement, and we make sure ward by ward that we spread the word and make this a collective approach, beginning and end. One last thing, if I may, Mr. Mayor, as you'll be giving me the space, is that the word on planting and the desire to be involved is spreading, and our team in CBC are helping that. That means that there's, I think, 8 or 9 parish councils from Stanway to West Mersey who started their own tree planting schemes in a cooperative way with CBC. So I think it is very much becoming a collective with the grain of public opinion community approach, and councillors to the fore would be great.
And apologies for using my position, Councillor King, but can I make sure that when we do plant the trees for years in the spring, that they're actually substantial trees rather than just raspberry canes?
I'm happy to have the conversation with you, Mr. Mayor, but there's an issue of cost here. There is an issue of care too. We need to make sure that we do that in a way that means whatever is planted is sustainable and does grow and we do care about it. Don't worry about the Mayor's wood. I understand some of those at least will be a nice size, but it is a balance. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's your budget, Councillor King. I appreciate that. Councillor Chris Pearson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor King, in his response to another question a little bit earlier, just raised with me a concern. He referred to the sad demise of Debenhams, and of course we know that Arcadia have gone into administration as well this week. Yeah. I just wonder, Councillor King, and I know it's probably early days, so you may not be able to answer in any detail this evening, but I'm sure in your inimitable way you will keep us all informed. I just wonder if this has any impact on the town deal.
To my knowledge, it can't, and it wouldn't. It certainly shouldn't. I mean, if it does anything, it's clearly adding pressure to approve and adding pressure on us all collectively to design and deliver well. I see no implication for it other than, as I say, that the need to add to the feel, the look, the way that Colchester works, for the better and for the longer term. I think we're all made yet more aware of how important the town deal could be as part of the approach to that, as destination Colchester and all the things we talked about elsewhere. But thank you for the question. And back to the beginning of it, absolutely. And if we've got some things that we can share, we do get some insights. That's all they are, and we do our best to track economic activity and who's at risk. And we had, I have to say, we had good hopes for Debenhams, but that now looks unlikely as a collective anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scordis, you'll be pleased to know Councillor Bentley is back in the room. Would you like to re-ask your question?
Oh, okay, yeah. Yes, sorry, Councillor Bentley. In your role as Chair of Scrutiny, a couple of years ago, we had an excellent meeting with the bus companies. Since then, there have been some improvements, but there's a lot of work to do to improve the partnership working. Wondering if you'll be amenable enough to add the bus companies to the scrutiny work programme.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, my apologies. You may still see I had some internet problems. So after the break, I sort of fell out of the meeting. I couldn't get back in till just now. So I do apologise. Yes, of course, Councillor Scholars. Of course, I do debate these matters with the other group spokes from the other parties. But there's no reason we shouldn't discuss buses. And in fact, we need to encourage that more in terms of bus use, of course, with the work we're doing in Colchester. And absolutely, if the other group leaders are amenable, then I will be putting that on the agenda for you.
Good, thank you. And did you have a supplementary, Councillor Scordis? No, excellent. You'll be pleased to know that's the end of questions. And we've, time-wise, I think we've still got 7 minutes yet. So can I draw your attention to item 10, schedules of portfolio holder decisions. There are some significant decisions there, improving household stock, kitchens and other void works, and more importantly, 8 new council houses. More importantly still, I suppose, with the COVID situation, the business grant allocation for the latest government handout. So hopefully businesses across the borough will take advantage of that. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the meeting. There are no urgent items. Can I remind you that my theme for the year is helping others? I think the 2 motions we've had today actually contribute to that. But over the festive period, I would love you to all be conscious of your communities and help others and bring a bit of light to their dark days. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and a healthier next year. And actually, we have got time for a quick carol, if anybody wants to lead. Councillor Young, are you offering? No?
I think Silent Night.
I'll do
Yeah.
Fairy Tale of New York. Shall we do the Pogues?
Yes. I think we might practice offline first and then bring it back for another meeting. Anyway,
Hopefully.
have a wonderful Christmas, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And good night for now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good night, Mr. Mayor.